Just so everybody knows, we started not at 6:31 New Mexico time, but 7:31 Texas time.
Very important. This feels better already, doesn't it? Like Central Time. Everybody knows what that is. Mountain Time? No, that is. I see MST, I think Mexico. Mexico time?
Got to be the lowest population time zone has got to be Mountain Time, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Most likely, yeah, for sure.
Is there. Nobody important lives there anyways.
So, yeah.
For sure. Agreed 100%.
That's a vacation time zone and a retirement time zone. Two groups of people who don't need to know what time it is live in Mountain Time.
And then here I am, not in either one of those. Stuck in the god-awful middle ground.
Exactly, man. Everyone around you
sport franchises, man. You don't want to be there in the middle ground. You want to be either a rebuilding franchise or riding off into the sunset.
Yeah, I'm neither.
Shame.
It's hard out
there.
You
don't know that. You could die in a year. This could be your riding off into the sunset.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I mean, it happens. Kid went headfirst into a tree over the weekend and didn't make it.
The tree already?
21.
God. Damn.
That's rough. That is about the age, though. It's unfortunate fact of life, but most guys that end up killing themselves in dumb ways is below the age of 25 because that's when we're feeling it the most, baby.
For sure.
Yep. Cut my wrist and black my eyes, baby. It's time. But R.I.P. to that kid, man. That's definitely a sad way to go out. It's a nice reminder that this could be your last week on Earth. So at least don't waste that time. Make sure you go to that happy hour on Wednesday. Everybody's waiting.
and if your office allows you to dress casual on Casual Friday, take full advantage of it.
Bring out your favorite pair of jeans, man.
Was this a young conservative man? Was he just blinded by all the winning and just elated with joy and shining his light as he flew down that hill?
You know the clientele.
This is fair. I almost asked. I was going to start profiling. I was going to go, let me guess. He's a white kid. And I thought, that's a pretty easy guess on this.
Oh, the skier is white. What a shock.
Hey, you know what? When I take off my helmet, I'm sure there's some audible gasp in certain crowds.
Jesus, how did he get that sunburned out here?
I didn't know Italians could ski.
My God.
Honey,
do you feel like there's still an
attraction
attraction up there? Is it still? I guess there's enough tourists that there's always going to be new eyes that are shocked to see an African man on the slopes.
Yeah, I'm sure, but I don't. You know what I mean? That's I don't pay attention to the peasants, to be honest. I'm not looking around. I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. Like I know I don't care. I don't care about the tourists. I don't care about their looks. They're on my mountain. They're inferior to me. And so, yeah, I don't pay any attention to them.
Okay. Well, we know who the 6 in the polycule is. Apparently it's you.
What's the 6 mean?
I was implying that was the hot. Yeah, I was implying it was the hottest person in any given polycule.
Thank you. I appreciate
that. Just group leader. Oh, that's a hell of a way to open up, starting talking about our new governmental system, comparing it to polycules and the.
Actually, I got something to say real quick as well. I know we've talked about this on weeks before. I am still utterly shocked by the fact that we can just rename things and everybody goes along with it. Google Maps, it's now Gulf of America. I was on a flight to Mexico. They called it the Gulf of America. And then they repeated that in Spanish. On a flight to Mexico with Mexicans on it. I was like, what? We can just name stuff? Like,
I bet what was the vibe like in a plane full of Mexicans when they started calling it the Gulf of America? Was it kind of a snickering laugh, or was it a little more contempt than that?
I mean, the plane was
Or do you
loud.
also not concern yourself with the concerns of peasants while you're in first class up there?
I was definitely not in first class, unfortunately. The plane was loud. There was like a little bit of like looking around, but I think people were looking for other reactions from other people. And for the most part, like, do you really care? I don't know. It's a name, but I'm still shocked. I didn't know we could do it. I know when Israel invades like a new country, Google adjusts the map within like 2 days. But like, I didn't know we had that.
Well, that's
power
because
too.
they own all the internet, though. You know.
Yeah.
And if they don't, the space lasers will get the facility.
I guess that's fair. If you're looking for like a group of people who are going to take a joke well, the plane on the way to the beach in Mexico might be the most lighthearted plane. Like, it's probably hard to like offend somebody on some level where they're going to stand up and ruin their vacation.
You never know, man. But we were going to the heart of the Yucatan, man. No beach nearby. So there's a lot of Mayans on that plane.
Oh yeah.
I don't really know what Mayans think from like the aspect of like, is Mexico still a colonial power? How do they view like Europeans talking about maps? I have no fucking idea.
There might be a little bit of like, what goes around comes around, right? You dirty Mexicans for kicking us off our land. Not your Gulf anymore. Just like you renamed it the Gulf of Mexico. Right back at you. Oh, that reminded me. I forgot. I had a
Conquered, not stolen
video here for just that, a renaming. There's a new term that I just love that I wanted you guys to get a look at here, as I didn't stall long enough to load the video. I want to show you.
You should have prepared, man.
You to say a couple of words about it.
Yes, well, as you know, Mr. President, since you issued your day one executive orders, border crossings are down approximately 95%. You talk to agents on the line, in their entire careers, they've never seen crossing days as low as what they're experiencing right now. The cartels, in fact, are enormously frustrated because they've never seen a clampdown like this before in American history. There are people who were working at Border Patrol back when it was an INS in the 80s and 90s. They've never seen a day like this. That's because you've mobilized the 10th Mounted Division, the Marines, the entire U.S. military. They're erecting physical miles of barrier, temporary and ultimately permanent, every single day. You have all of your border agents pushed to the front line. They're not doing the humanitarian processing, quote unquote, that Biden was doing. They're doing law enforcement and national security. They're interdicting weapons and drugs. They're interdicting violent, high-threat criminals. And the U.S. military is repatriating illegal immigrants at a pace and a skill that has never occurred before in American history. And those who are committing human trafficking and child trafficking are being prosecuted for felony offenses, and they'll be doing hard time in jail. There's never been a lockdown like what you have implemented through your orders and vision since you took the oath of office.
Did y'all catch my favorite new term there?
No.
We're not deporting them anymore. We're repatriating them back to their homelands. We're turning them into patriots.
Okay.
I'd never heard repatriating until this last week, and I heard that, and I laughed maniacally. I was like, I love that as the positive spin. Like, oh, we're not deporting anybody anymore. We're allowing you to become a patriot of your original country.
Homecoming isn't just a high school thing now. It's a thing for adults as well.
That was maybe my favorite moment of all the madness. I believe it was in LA where there was a large protest march going on for all the deportations, and they went through a tunnel, and the cops just capped off both ends of the tunnel and checked everybody's paperwork and just took everybody home who was protesting from foreign lands.
Damn.
It was one of those like and I have a little bit of sympathy for you guys are seemingly a little more gung-ho about all the deportations even than I am, but even with a little bit of sympathy with that one, you're kind of like, I mean, you're out there waving flags of your home country, screaming shit about America. Like, I don't know. That one felt kind of good. that one giggled me a bit.
Yeah, it definitely is kind of like the bad look if you're trying to stay here, you know? Never really quite works or fits right, you know?
I do think it's nice of them to wave the flag of the country they need to be sent back to. That's helpful for the ICE agents. They could,
absolutely helps them
paperwork.
sort them out. It's like, it's like, oh wait, everyone who's got the white and blue flag, come over here to section 1. Everybody that's got the green, white and red one, go over there to section 2. All those that we don't know the flags, go to section 4. We'll figure it out later.
We've only got a couple memorized outside of Mexico. Got a bunch of confused Italians in Mexico next year.
No, turn it sideways. It's Ireland.
There was did y'all catch wind of the protest day I forget what they call it, a day without immigrants or something like that, where they were having
That
a
was the day of that
nationwide
protest, right? Where the
I think it
flags on
was
highway.
the same, probably so. Yeah. There was a local restaurant that they banded together and had to talk with each other about how we're all irreplaceable. They can't run this place without us. So we're going to partake in the protest. And they just called the corporate team and restaffed that place in a week. I'm going again. But I've been in restaurants long enough to know, like, even a good restaurant, you expect 150% turnover rate in a year, typically. They ain't no such thing as replaceable at the level of people who are making the food. You are like, they're and on replacing you by the end of the year anyway. If everything goes great, they're anticipating replacing you in 4 years.
Damn, that's
so to think
brutal.
you're irreplaceable flipping the burgers is like, guys, you are not going to have a job tomorrow.
Ooh.
Not totally fair.
Restaurant.
Honestly, it feels like almost every single industry has gotten to this point where it's just constant churn of employees. There's no such thing as like long-term talent anywhere. So it makes sense that the restaurants are kind of like, yeah, everybody's gone in what, 6.5 months? Like, what's the average seniority at a restaurant?
Yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head. I remember the 150% in a year because I remember just thinking, like, what, we're supposed to fire and hire an entirely new staff, and half of that again within every year is kind of the expectation.
Well,
and
all the workers at the federal government.
Yeah,
to be fair.
Hey, this wasn't a Doge problem. We run pretty efficiently at restaurants. There's not much fat to be trimmed the way they set up the system currently.
Yeah, I imagine y'all's books could be audited if someone wanted to audit, right?
I'm sure. In fact, they go through an audit weekly and quarterly within the corporate system itself anyway. Obviously, I guess that's a little different than an external audit, but yeah, you're constantly, I mean, you're dealing in things that go rotten in a week's time. So your bookkeeping has to be pretty good. You got to be on top of moving that product if you don't want to lose money. That's why I always dreamed of opening my own restaurant. The older I get and the more I've worked in restaurants and seen the books, the closer I am to opening a bar someday.
Bars are where it's at. All the margins
Alcohol
in
doesn't go
restaurants
bad.
are booze anyways.
It really is. Yeah, you're really trying to funnel people into drink for the most part.
For sure.
That's where your real money gets made.
Yeah, restaurant margins are not great.
And every
booze
little thing you got to cook.
Fantastic.
Add a fryer, you just added another person for $15 an hour. So it gets expensive to start cooking things.
Not in my country. We're going to pay the federal minimum wage, $7.25, baby.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than starting a business to double your income, but also tripling your hours at the same time.
Yeah, right.
Not a good trade.
Yeah, not great. And you got to train all those people too. And you're going to fire half of them before the year's end to train them again.
and train a whole new staff. Yeah, for sure.
It gets expensive. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm still running into people that are having that conversation, like especially the boomer class conservative, where it's like, well, you guys obviously didn't have to worry about any of this immigration thing because y'all didn't hire an entirely new staff. So that means everybody here must be 100% legal. And you're like, dude, that's not at all. That's not exactly how things work in this industry, to be honest with you. There's also that thing of like, man, you get all these illegals out here and we can finally start getting jobs for good Americans. It's like, dude, the only Americans that apply for this job are 16 years old. I kind of like having some 35-year-old illegals that work here that are adults and can do things.
It's totally
allegedly
fair,
I should say, I guess.
Allegedly, right? Way to go, Logan.
If
you
we
just
had
caused at least 12 people to get deported by that statement. Hope you're happy.
It's totally fair. The price of a hamburger is gonna have to go up to like $30 if you really want to hire like competent Americans to do it. And maybe there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe that is the direction dining needs to go in. Because it's kind of weird. If you look at like Uber Eats and whatnot, people are spending like $35 to have a hamburger delivered. Who's to say they wouldn't show up and pay $28 for a hamburger made by a middle-aged adult man who's being paid a livable wage?
Yeah. Who might actually know something about the product he's cooking and be knowledgeable about how things should taste and be seasoned and be safe to cook.
Yeah, it also implies that like half of the restaurants would have to shut down, but still, maybe that's the direction we have to go in. I don't know.
It very
Things
well
might
might
have
be. I
to
mean,
get
it's
worse before they get better.
and who knows? That may be downstream from deportations and job openings coming about in this country. Like to that point, like you just can't really hire an adult with children because you don't pay that wage in restaurants right now. That job doesn't exist outside even the management level. Like most of them have a side gig, even if they have a family. It's pretty hard to even make money at that level. So you'd
Wow.
start trying to find you some fry cooks that are adults. It gets pretty difficult in a hurry.
Absolutely. And this reminds me of something I wrote about a long time ago where I was just asking people what sort of job openings they were seeing advertised around the places they lived in and whatnot. And I was kind of surprised. I was seeing like a bunch of like warehouse work at like $25 an hour. There were a few people who said they were paying $40 an hour for construction sites in like the Washington, D.C., Virginia area. But for the most part, everything was like high teens and low 20s. And I was wondering if that trend was just going to keep pushing up to the point where maybe someone who has like kind of an unfulfilling white collar career might consider like, hey, maybe I pick up construction and like double my pay or something. And obviously, I
Get
don't
some
think
nice
we've gotten
shave
there
on the
yet.
side.
Yeah, why not, right? But if the bottom rung of the labor market keeps moving in that direction, there is certainly a point where maybe we see some people transitioning back in that direction because it all of a sudden makes sense for the phase of life they're in. It's an interesting thing to think about. I think there'd obviously have to be like a a much stronger trend continuing in that direction. But I do wonder what sorts of decisions people might make if suddenly that was like an option for them again.
I know of somebody up here, without giving like too much details, that had like a pretty good job, and they ended up leaving it to start a painting company up here for
Mhm.
that very reason. It's like they had a good job. They were good at their job, and they're like, or I could just paint and make way more money. And so so they left that job, and they just run a painting crew now, and for all intents and purposes making way more and doing way better than their good job before. So it makes sense. It's and there's certain things that it's like trial and error, right? It's like I don't know if it's so easy to just like become an electrician or a plumber, but there's definitely lots of other jobs that are available and get on a framing crew. Framing crews make good money. Painting crews make good money up here. So it makes sense.
I wonder if one day
And to
we'll
that
be saying
point,
the same thing about dishwashers, fry cooks.
right.
Certainly
I mean,
possible.
there is that, and you kind of brushed on that earlier, but it's been for a long time just kind of the corporate system. Like I used to complain that it was restaurants, but I've grown enough and seen enough other people bitch about their professions that it's pretty obvious that it's kind of the corporate norm. Like you eventually, if you're successful, you get purchased by a much larger corporation that tends to just deal in moving money around, and now you have a bunch of bean counters who have never actually worked in your industry or haven't worked in your industry in many years, and decisions are getting made based on a profit and loss sheet and not on like what does our business actually represent? What are we trying to do here? Why do we have this robust corporate team where everybody makes six figures when we're a taco restaurant, for example? Some random example.
No,
Yeah.
it makes sense though, because I mean, I see it in the ski industry, and that's one of the big things that I lament is that venture capitalists have gobbled up ski resorts because people that, if you only look at the bottom line, you miss a lot of the context that's really important. And I know that this isn't a conversation about the future of the ski industry, but think about like when we were in college, which you could actually go on a ski trip for. Like we as poor college kids, like as a freshman, I was able to rank, you know what I mean? There was like we could wrangle up enough money to go to Breckenridge as
Mhm.
as college kids. Now, if you wanted to take your family of five to go to Breckenridge, it's going to cost you $10,000 at least to go. There's no way that like what used to be affordable and accessible to everybody is now being priced out, and because of that, well, families aren't choosing to ski and snowboard, and now you're not capturing the next generation. And so it's one of
Yeah.
those things that you're making money right now at the expense of the future of your industry, because I think within 20, 30 years, the ski like mountains they're gonna start closing because they're gonna be hemorrhaging cash, all because they just priced out the next generation. And for why? Just, you know what I mean? Was how many billions of profit that wasn't enough. You know, you couldn't settle for a couple $100 million of profit. You had to go to the billions, and now you're priced out.
Seems so short-term sighted too. I guess when it's a generation though, if you're a 60-year-old venture capitalist, maybe you're not worried about what that resort's going to make in 40 years. You're just worried about what it's going to make right now.
It's fair.
So that you can get the hottest blonde bimbo with the biggest fake boobs before you go into the great blue yonder.
And ultimately, the venture capital business model isn't about long term. You know, it's like, what can I buy and then juice the books for 3 or 4 years and then sell at a higher multiple. I mean, that is the core of the venture capital business model. It's not about like, can we serve the neighborhood with tasty and healthy meals for the next 3 generations? You know, because if that's what you're doing, there's no real business you can buy and improve at that point. You're not going to juice a margin by jumping from ketchup to fancy ketchup or whatever the next grade of ketchup is. But ironically, that might do a lot for like the people in that area, in much the same way that you can ruin a ski town for 4 years of good profit and juicing the books by cutting costs. And like ultimately, I think the next like big culture war has to be something against venture capital in some way, shape, or form. I say as a dirty capitalist, so it's like, you know, the biggest thorn in our sides in terms of sustainable businesses and companies that aren't just constantly exploiting people, exploiting the environment, exploiting customers, exploiting our health, exploiting our well-being. And also the same way, like, you know, if you wanted to start a business to compete with them, they're going to choke you out because you're trying to use the slightly tastier tomatoes for your pizza sauce. And, you know, they can squeeze out that 5-cent margin per pizza and then, you know, use that to screw you on advertising in some sense. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where that comes from, whether it comes from the right or the left wing of the political establishment. But I don't know. Both sides could do it. Obviously, I don't think JD Vance is going to be like anti-VC. Neither is Elon Musk, nor is Vivek Ramaswamy, the venture capital golden boy. But I think ultimately someone will, because most experiences people have with venture capital is it kind of just shows up like a vampire and sucks all the blood of the business and then runs off and leaves somebody else holding the bag. And usually the somebody else is a dumber venture capital company that thinks they can buy and improve the margins even more.
Wait, who do we buy this from? Oh, shit. No, that was and that's a theme that definitely comes up a lot on this podcast of like, look, it's not coming from the top down. Like it has to come from a cultural. That's kind of the whole educate the world about being libertarians idea that I have, that I push back on Matt's post-libertarian ideas on all the time of like, it's going to take this large groundswell of like, we have to educate enough people to vote with our dollars in order to look at companies like Vanguard and BlackRock and be like, hey, we're just not doing business with them anymore because they've shown that they're these incubi, basically. They're just sucking wealth and the livelihoods of this community out of it for a quick buck. And so, you know, let's divert all of our attention to assets that are not owned by these venture capitalists that are trying to just make a buck. But, you know, it's a long way. It's a lot of educating and a lot of people with IQs at room temperature you got to convince to help out with this idea.
The room temperature IQ, though, is the big problem, right? It's not that I don't disagree with that in theory. In theory, it sounds great. It's just that my lived real world experience tells me that that's like, I don't know. And not to say that it could never happen. It certainly might happen.
I actually think we have an interesting opportunity right now in front of us, too. And some of this I had brushed back against Project 2025 just to see if there's anything I'd missed and if they're following the playbook as it went down. And I ultimately kind of came to the conclusion that like, oh yeah, Project 2025 is basically just liberals mad that they're going to replace unelected liberals with unelected conservatives. So, but we have this big groundswell right now where we have Doge going through with the wrecking ball and taking out all these agencies and lessening our expenditures and showing us all the ridiculous over expenditures we have of government. We if they don't turn around and try to just fill all of that void with more conservatives to push the agenda towards the right rather than actually lessen the size of government, if we see some real potential change in this 4-year section that Trump has here, even if we have a Vivek or a JD Vance that we're not super encouraged by necessarily at the next level, I wonder if there's not an opportunity for kind of the Mises Caucus movement that was supposed to happen this last election cycle to potentially form a stronger spear point now, to start kind of pulling people to, hey, remember how much you liked when, and maybe it's not the next election, but even the one after, remember how great things were when we were actually cutting the size of government. And when we were looking at all the waste we were cutting out before the conservatives went too far and started just replacing it with more conservative values and conservative unelected officials. And that's this great opportunity in the future, perhaps, for our argument to go, look, let's go back to what is actually the plan of cutting the size of government that all you Republicans were cheering for, that then got betrayed on, but that it's just not going to come through these two parties. We have to have conversations about third-party systems, and specifically the one decent ideology out there, the Libertarian Party.
I don't think it's gonna work, man.
Fucking, you had this smirk the whole time you were talking, dude.
waiting to
I
slap
was
me
just
down.
waiting. I was just waiting for
Well,
it.
I was
History would indicate you're correct. I mean, there's a lot of precedents to say you're right.
I just think after this election, like, the Libertarian Party got bitch slapped so bad that it's just, how do you come back from that? You know, I don't know how you do. You know, Trump is going around keeping all these promises to the Libertarian caucus, and the Libertarians didn't even like really support him. And of course, I understand, you know, the Libertarian caucus is very different from the Libertarian electorate, but like, I think there's a lot of Libertarians who are kind of looking around. It's like, well, why don't I just find someone else who's going to make promises to me and my base in one of the major two parties instead of trying to actually win a third party election? And like, you know, there's people having conversations right now that the Libertarian Party's move should be to simply just agree to concessions from one of the two parties every single four-year cycle. And it doesn't look like a bad strategy. I mean, unless the Libertarian Party starts winning at local elections, which kind of do sometimes, but
not on a scale that would make sense yet, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. There's definitely been some very encouraging concessions made to the Libertarian Party after Trump visited them. I mean, even to the point of Ross Albright getting out of prison is a big one. You know, there's been a lot of good out of this strategy, though it was one maybe I've pushed back on personally. And I guess I just don't quite trust Republicans yet to not turn this into a
Nor should you.
theological state in the end.
Nor
you know?
should you. You should never trust them.
And I don't.
Yeah. As soon as Trump is gone, I don't really see any reason to trust a Republican unless one of them really puts like another earnest foot forward in a way that makes it seem like they're actually going to do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
And who knows who the next one's going to be. You know, and right now JD Vance is like part of that crew, but like when it's him calling the shots, is he still going to be the same guy? You know, Trump is wealthy enough that like there's not really anything a donor can promise him that's going to move the needle for him at all. JD Vance, I don't know what his net worth is, but I imagine it's not enough. Like, he's got like 3 little kids or 4. I don't know how many. It seems like a dude of integrity, but you know, you never really know how much integrity someone has until the devil really comes calling. So who knows? We'll see. I'm just happy we got 4 years, you know? But also, speaking of Ross, I guess I owe you another $5, huh, Matt?
Dude,
let me pay you right now for that bet from our last.
We're not tired of winning yet, man. And you're gonna get so tired of winning, but that day is not today.
Hey, your Trump's getting pretty good over there. By the end of those 4 years, you're gonna have it down for sure. Aren't you so glad we don't have to work on our Kamala Harris impressions?
Oh my God, yes.
I put a good 2 months in there during her presidential run, trying to get that voice down, and I'm relieved to abandon that one. I couldn't get it down.
If anyone ever asks if you might be a pessimist, that might be the biggest sign.
What, did you work on your Kamala Harris voice?
Yeah.
I could get there, but I just had to drink so much wine first to like really hit the right resonance. And
Dude, Michael
it
Malice
made for not
is
palatable. Yeah,
like the
wine
stages
mom.
of wine moms. It's so good. He
So
nailed
perfect.
it.
It's so perfect. Yeah, it's too
Yeah.
bad. That's maybe the one downside to this election cycle is that we don't get to watch Michael Malice destroy Kamala Harris. Man, that's another one we got to do. Maybe that's next week's episodes. Has anybody watched the full 60 Minutes interview yet?
I have
Which interview
not.
is this?
The Kamala Harris one that she went on 60 Minutes like a week before the election, and they released like 20 minutes, and everybody thought that was kind of weird that 60 Minutes released 20 minutes, and then for whatever reason, they've released the full 60 Minutes now, and everybody's talking about how,
Well,
oh my God.
whatever reason is that Donald Trump is suing CBS.
Oh, okay.
That's the whatever reason is that they are now drugged to court by Donald Trump. And I don't know how I feel about a sitting president suing media companies when he can clearly stack the deck against the company. And I haven't watched the video, so I'm sure that it was egregious. I'm sure that Kamala Harris was horrible, and 60 Minutes did the best job that they could to present her in a favorable light because that's the way the network leans. Also, 60 Minutes edits every interview that they do, so I don't, you know what I mean? Like, for me, this one's like, I don't have the outrage on this one that a lot of other people do, just because, like, yeah, they edit every interview. That's kind of the point of 60 Minutes.
That was the whole point of her going on there, was to get a good interview for the campaign trail. Everybody in the room knew
and
that.
I'm sure that she was horrible. You know what I mean? I'm sure the 60 Minutes and CBS did the best they could to portray her in a favorable light. I don't know. That one seems just like, I just have a hard time, like,
I would say
upset.
outrage isn't really what I'm feeling. It's more just curiosity about how bad it was. I just want to see.
I'm sure it was horrendous.
I want to see her talk for 60 straight minutes and see what
I bet
it
it was
like.
so bad.
It may just be a reaffirmation into believing this was the right choice, you know? Like, go watch 60 minutes of that and you might be like, you know what? I'm just down with whatever we're doing the next 4 years.
Maybe Elon's not so bad, you know.
It might be the last chance you get to practice your Kamala cackle. Because where else is she going to be cackling on camera for the next 4 years? Like,
Good point.
She's probably disappearing. Same thing.
Yeah,
That
the answer would be anytime she's on camera, but that would be the diminishing factor. Is we may not see much of her anymore.
Yeah,
it will be interesting after being lauded as such a good candidate and all the talk of like, I can't believe you guys thought that she was just thrown in there. You say all this garbage about DEI hires because Biden clearly said he was going to hire a black woman for the job before he went out looking for anybody, and all these terrible things, and then just turn around and have this like, oh no, obviously it's a horrible option.
You know, it begs the question: what is Kamala Harris doing right now? Let's see if Google will tell us.
I know her husband went back to work at a very high-powered law firm, probably making bukus of dollars.
Well,
sure.
It was a nice dream to be first gentleman, but it's time to go back to work now.
We can all dream, man. We can all dream.
That is maybe the one political shirt I still regret not buying was a Bill Clinton for first gentleman t-shirt. Would have been nice in my repertoire.
Yeah, probably not half bad. I can't really find anything new that she's into right now. Maybe she's being mostly private for the most part.
Licking her wounds.
Let's see. Okay, her husband was a lawyer before and was a partner at an LLP, so it makes sense that he's back working in law.
I guess if she still has political aspirations, the smartest way to spend this time away from the election cycle would be to decide which race she's going to run as next time.
As, not in, huh?
Yeah, as. What's my demographic this time?
Let's see.
She could probably throw Native American out there. She definitely looks more Native than Warren does.
Yeah, but then how is she going to have like the bona fides of like, you know, Jamaican, Rasta, Bold Boy? You know, she's got none of that if she's local.
Don't you dare put it past any politician to pander to every single base simultaneously.
All right,
They're
she's
more than
she's
happy to take
talking
it.
about running for governor of California in 2026
I've heard that.
or retiring from politics.
God, I hope
that
it's the
sounds-
second one.
That sounds
I
more
don't
appealing.
see I don't see how she beats Gavin Newsom in California in 2026.
Is he does California cap terms of governors? Or because he is on his second term.
Let's see.
So
This might take me a while to look up. So feel free to
Yeah.
talk about
well,
whatever.
I'm just curious.
You don't want us to stare at you the whole time?
If
Mouth the gate.
Right.
Did you find it yet?
Look things up.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, what is she hoping Newsom's preoccupied with a potential presidential run? Which I would
Maybe.
imagine the first part of that is making sure you win your current election, right? You definitely can't lose a
Oh, yeah, they
smaller
do
election
have-
and then run for
they
president.
do have term limits. So
he'll
Gavin,
be termed out.
yeah, he can't run in 2026.
Hmm.
So okay. Yeah, maybe Kamala Harris could run.
Dude, I
And,
hope she runs and she gets. I hope it's the first Republican governor since what Ronald Reagan is. Who is the last Republican? Oh no, Arnold. I guess.
Arnold, dude.
Yeah.
You know what would be
Right.
great
It's
is
possible.
Donald Trump after his presidential run should run for governor of California. He should just
Good
move out
God, no.
there, challenge Kamala Harris again.
Dude, that would be so fun. Like everywhere she goes, he just moves and runs in the same.
You know what? I
election
always
again.
thought I would make an excellent senator.
She's running for some
So-
like local, like she's running for like a low level DA position. I've always loved the law.
I know Trump was trying
So
to
you think you
condition,
can be
like,
a comptroller
retirement.
now?
I'm sorry, what were you saying, Flirt?
I was just saying Trump was trying to commission or condition the fire money on California requiring voter ID for elections. I wonder if they got that through or not. I haven't heard anything since then, but it'd be interesting to know if, like, in 2026, that election required strict voter IDs in California, because then it might actually be like a tough race for Kamala to win. It'd be interesting to see her get blown out again.
God, could you
Why-
imagine your legacy to have her horrible, pitiful presidential run and then to lose the governorship of California to the first Republican since
Donald.
20 years,
That's been about 20 years, hasn't it?
somewhere in there. Why?
that would be
I've never understood
the only blunder greater than Hillary Clinton's political career, I would think.
Yeah, it's not good. I've never gotten why people argue against voter ID. That I've never understood any of the still manning, like why it's wrong to require voter ID. I just don't get it. To this day, I've never had any argument presented to me. It's like, oh, that's reasonable. We should definitely let people not identify themselves and vote.
Yeah, there really just isn't a good ID argument. I've never been able to find one for allowing just anybody to vote. Doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. And no other country really does it either, so it's hard to point to somewhere else. Like even India requires like rudimentary IDs to vote, and they have like over
Something.
people.
Yeah,
it's just-
I mean, Half-Life, we already talked about this. Most of them shit outside, you know, and
Yeah.
if all of those people can be required to show up with some sort of ID. Oh, we lost Logan.
oh
I
no.
was wondering when he was gonna disappear. He'd been frozen
You
for a
heard him.
second.
His big heart was just too full. Too full of love for the Indian subcontinent, man.
2 sizes too big. Oh, let me
But-
send him another invite and see
Yeah,
what's
go
up
for
real
it.
fast.
It's definitely just a tough argument to steal man, no matter how you try to do it, because it's like, there's that maxim: it's better to let 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man go in prison. Like that maxim's just 100% wrong, especially when it comes to like preventing fraud. Like it's far better to have a system where like 5% of legitimate votes can't get through, as long as no illegitimate votes get through. Because if you have a system where any illegitimate votes get through, then it invalidates the entire set of votes, and essentially there's no legitimate votes.
Yeah.
Kind of what you get, and I think that's just kind of the main issue with voting. And obviously, you get past some of the like patently racist arguments about like blah blah blah. People can't find the DMV, whichever group you want to talk about. It's just kind of a painful thing where people are justifying the fact that it's working in their favor. Because obviously, if the other party was winning, everybody who is saying all these arguments would be like, no, we need tougher voter ID laws. It's my team good, enemy team bad, blah, 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 blah. There's Mr. Big Heart again.
Not sure where I went there for a second.
Welcome back, Mr. Big Heart. You just had so much love for the Indian subcontinent that you lost connection.
That could make sense. My heart does go out to my Indian people.
My heart goes out, baby.
I was thinking more like Indiana Jones, the Kalima, right out of chest.
I'll say this.
I have been majorly conscious ever since that Elon Musk moment at how often I wave to people, kind of in a similar.
Oh yeah, true. You just kind of like hands up.
Hey, have a good one, man. And I'm like, man, I do that probably too much. I need to think about that. I've been doing a lot of alligator arms this week. Hey, see you later.
Hey,
it's not getting above my
head.
Guys later.
Y'all
have a good one.
It's probably why a lot of people will do this kind of wave where they're like waving their hand back and forth just to make it very clear. Because like I'm just lazy. I just hand up and back down. But it definitely
give it a little malleability in the wrist, and you're like, see, I'm not a Nazi. I'm gay. It's not a big deal.
I will. Did you guys see that the University of Chicago took away Kanye West honorary degree? And
bro,
I think with
right when he is embarked on this journey for truth too.
I think that it's my only thing is that we should be a little wary of somebody with his rhetoric denying that, you know what I mean? Like, do we really want to take his degree away? Look what happened the last time somebody didn't get into art school.
I was about to say, is it literally an art degree too?
It's
repeating history.
Bro, his tweets were one of the only things I looked at while I was in Mexico.
Unhinged.
That comes from like the internet.
Unhinged.
I was dying, absolutely dying. I don't know if y'all saw when he was like roasting Dave Chappelle. That part had me just gasping for air because he was just like, "You don't get any pussy, Dave. Not like me and John Mayer."
I like who's got throwing John Mayer. Which, to be fair, I'm sure that John Mayer gets enough pussy to kill most men, you know?
I guess, but like, why is that the dude that you're comparing to? Is like, oh, the true pussy hound of 2009, John Mayer.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a great reference from 10 years ago, but it's a little bit. That is my favorite kind of genre of music, though, is the guy who exclusively writes songs about love and women that are too good for him and how he's undeserving of them, and then also fucks every single woman on the planet.
100%.
I think that's a hilarious type of artist, specifically because it's women's favorite type of artist. When it's like, do you see the wolf under that sheep's wool, or you just know? All right.
You just need to read one woman's smut fiction book to understand that is exactly what they want, man. John Mayer as a vampire, light choking play, and some little incest play. That's a book right there. You can sell that, top seller right there.
Oh man, I don't like that John Mayer is now part of this conversation. I personally love John Mayer's music, and I think he's a fantastic blues guitarist.
I didn't say I don't like his music. I didn't say he's not awesome at guitar. I said he writes a lot of songs about being a romantic, and it doesn't seem to stick with any of them bitches very long.
Fair enough. I'm sure it's probably pretty hard, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm sure it's really hard fucking every hot celebrity woman who gets a divorce. I'm sure that's a difficult life.
Must be impossible. He's like the what's his face? Who's
competing with Pete Davidson over every woman?
That guy.
Like I said, dude, it would kill lesser men.
It almost has killed Pete Davidson. He barely has any skin left on his skeletal frame.
Honestly, I can hear him talking. Did I ever tell you how I got these bags under my eyes?
Is that Pete Davidson as the Joker?
You're not the only one who can do impressions, brother.
Oh,
A lot of people think these are bags. This is booty juice on my eye hole.
oh my goodness.
As I was finishing that sentence, I was trying to decide what fecal pronoun to use, and booty juice felt nice. It came out naturally.
That's a good one.
It's Kanye West approved.
Yeah, that's guys. That's out of bounds, out of control.
Also, Matt, I thought I heard you trying to switch to a sensible topic here real quick. So I'm gonna give you the floor.
I was thinking that now that we're 45 minutes in. Yeah, I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on? Because I know that back to like Elon and Doge and the White House presser and kind of the meltdown that we're seeing. Like, what are you guys' thoughts on quote unquote constitutional crisis? We in one, a lot of hubbub. What do you? We can start there.
Well, I think we have to have one libertarian acknowledgement before we even start this. That, like, obviously the idea of a constitutional crisis is not new to any libertarian. Anyone who's ever looked at news at any point in their entire life has probably thought to themselves, that's not constitutional. Wait a second, what are they doing? So it's quite interesting that, like, in the mainstream media, at least, the concept of like constitutional crisis is all of a sudden a thing now, because people are like, wait a second, he might go against a judge. And it's kind of like, this is obviously not new to us. But after that libertarian acknowledgement, now we can actually hop in and just talk about the present with no context from the past.
No. I think that's actually a really good place to start, because it seems like anybody that wants to scream about my democracy and my constitution really is ignoring the fact that for generations, Congress has just been divesting its authority and power to the executive branch. And because of that, then the courts have also stepped in and filled a bunch of those roles and power structures that Congress was designated to do. And it is interesting that it's only a constitutional crisis when it's what they don't like. It wasn't a constitutional crisis when Truman signed in a police action and unilaterally committed American troops to fight in Korea. It wasn't a constitutional crisis, insert all of these other things that are supposed to be the roles of Congress, but
Absolutely.
have been, it was never
any
that.
military action with boots on the ground that wasn't technically a war declared by a
yeah,
president.
for sure. And it's interesting that now that they're combing through the federal government, and JD Vance didn't even say, he didn't come out and say, like, we're going to start defying judicial orders. He didn't say that. And it was just like, he's just like, well, there's a certain limit to what judges can and can't do. And everybody just like shits the bed and be like, my democracy, what do we do? And I think people are playing their hand. They're showing their cards when they start screaming about constitutional crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I sit in a building, in a room where there is at least one gun here that the ATF wrote a letter that they just outlawed parts of the gun randomly. Nobody ever cried a tear for me. No one ever cried a tear for Duncan Lemp or anybody else who's been a victim of any of these three-letter agencies. But all of a sudden, we want to do one audit, and everybody loses their minds. Was that a good question?
Yeah, well done.
I would venture to say I've never seen a better Joker from someone who wasn't autistic.
Well, I mean, you're gonna have to get rid of that qualifier there.
Whoa, the tism be upon ye.
You're going to be about 7 on the scale then, because I've seen some damn good ones.
No, it's fair. I actually took a TISM test while we were in Mexico. The entire group, we all took autism tests. And I was not the highest scorer in the group, but I scored slightly above the lowest possible score that an autistic person could still score. So I'm a day walker, you could say. I pass someone. But we definitely
You're supposed
should
to autistically go into like 45 minutes of Daywalker lore there. We were kind of leaving the floor for you there.
Fuck Fuck that, dude. But if we do get back to the topic, it is interesting that, the way in which this constitutional crisis has arisen is from judges essentially just deciding what they want people to do, what they can't do, regardless of what's written in the law and in the legislation. Because when we originally had the separation of powers, the judges could only tell people what was and what wasn't legal based on what was already written by Congress and the Senate. And I think it's quite a naked power grab here, in the sense where you have a judge popping up and saying whatever they want to. And like I had talked to y'all earlier before we hopped on here about Trump v. Hawaii in 2018. It's the case about the whole Muslim ban where they tried to stop him from banning people coming from 8 countries, 3 of which were not Muslim, blah, blah, blah. Trump did win that case, and there were 2 separate opinions written by the majority position. The first one was that, yes, the executive power controls immigration. They have the right to do that. And the second one was from Clarence Thomas, and it was questioning the trend of lower district courts essentially stepping up and issuing what are global injunctions, and whether this is a broad overstep of their authority of these courts or not. And of the other judges that were there, none of them really also wanted to comment on that aspect of the case, and they kind of left it alone. But if one of these cases ends up going to the Supreme Court again, it's quite possible that Roberts or Alito or another might end up joining him and actually also asking that question. And we might get a ruling that all of a sudden either blocks these lower courts from making these broad injunctions, or might force them to issue an injunction bond based on the total value of the process they're trying to stop, which, when it's something simple like auditing fraud for 50 million, 150 million, the plaintiffs don't have that kind of scratch, and that kind of thing would stop these kinds of injunctions basically dead in their tracks as well. And it's an interesting game that I'd say the left is playing here, because they might end up losing their ability to do this forever just from overstepping their hand.
Yeah.
It is interesting, and what other cards are to play at this point, because it's gotten it rings hollow. Your constitutional crisis. Well, what about when 4 years ago when you locked everybody in their houses and told us we couldn't leave unless we took an experimental vaccine? And also, wasn't this guy a Nazi 6 months ago? Now he's just kind of messing around with the constitutional rules a little bit. The name calling is in the same way Elon got up there and just straight up gave a Nazi salute and had the ADL come get us back, because they've just worn these terms out so much at this point that they don't have any kind of civil in the public sphere influence anymore. People aren't buying it. He just won the popular vote despite being a fascist.
Oh,
so what is constitutional crisis even? Who gives a shit at this point? You guys have been using worse than that, and everybody's completely repudiated your claims at this point.
Right. It's when, it's the same thing. When everything's a Nazi, nothing is. When everything's a crisis, nothing is. And back to what Kiefer was saying, I think that's one of the most interesting things too about this, is that it's these district courts that are issuing these national injunctions. I think that I can't, it's I read this a couple of days ago, can't remember the specific language, but if you go back in the Constitution that talks about the power that's vested in the courts, you would be hard pressed to imagine the framers thinking that a district court and a district judge could then just all of a sudden decide national policy. When you start to read the text of it, you'd be like, wait a minute, isn't that a gross overstep of its authority? And I think it's fascinating that might actually come up, because you see that there are always these challenges in favorable districts. I mean, I think Amarillo was one, whatever district in Texas that is, when they tried to do the abortion. Why? Because there was a judge there that they knew was going to be very hard pressed against abortion, and they were going to try to get this whole stay for and you see the same on the other side, right? Why do certain people go to Manhattan to file certain suits? Why do people go to Rhode Island to file certain suits? Because it's a favorable district judge. And I think it is a vast overstep of judicial authority to then all of a sudden to have like one small judge decide for the nation what is and is not. Like, oh, well, everyone pause, you got to stop because I have ruled this. And then now we're going to toss it up through the court system to get there. And I missed I guess that's a concurrent opinion. I didn't read that in the Trump v. Hawaii, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And you probably didn't read it because it was only Thomas who put it out as his concurrent opinion. If some of the others had also opined on it, it might have been included in the majority opinion. But also what's interesting is when you look at like these lower district courts that were created, first there's federal court, Supreme Court is at the top of that. And originally it was supposed to be just the Supreme Court, but eventually you get to this point where like the burden of cases becomes too much for them to see in a timely manner. So they created these lower courts, and the whole point of these lower courts is like, hey, we've already ruled on this. You just affirm our previous ruling in here. You're not supposed to make new rulings. You're not supposed to create new precedent. You're just supposed to kind of affirm cases that we've ruled on before and kick everything else up to us so we can give new rulings. And that was like the initial thought process around creating them. But now when all of a sudden you have these like lower federal courts that are issuing like brand new statements and even things that like aren't even written in the law, then you're broadly overstepping the purpose of creating them. And you're even creating more work for the Supreme Court, where now the Supreme Court has to come in and like rule as an appellate judge on top of your ruling. And that's fucking ridiculous. The Supreme Court is not supposed to be appellate judge to like a minor lower court. They're supposed to be the primary court of record for anything of importance. And so you beg the question, like, why do we even have these lower district courts anyways? And, from that perspective, you then start to wonder if we should just be dissolving these courts in some form or fashion, which might be a question that ends up also being brought up here at some point.
But then what tools do we have to stop the plans of the tyrant that was democratically elected to be president of these United States?
We're just going to have to write another paid newsletter, brother. We're going to start a blog.
It is fascinating, though, that all of these secondary and tertiary ramifications that might come from some of this, because you think that it's like we're going to win because we have a district judge issue this ruling. But I'm going to keep an eye on that, because I would be fascinated to see if that ends up actually in front of the Supreme Court, where, like you said, they're all just like, let's actually take a look at this, because it just seemed that all like the frivolous lawsuits and picking favorable jurisdictions to file certain things that all of a sudden have a right. Like, why should a district judge in Texas or any part of the state have a national implication? It makes no sense. It might make
becomes
sense
a political tool really fast.
Exactly.
That's all these are. It's just like, oh, that's the way you vote, I guess.
And it's been used like that. And I don't know if you guys took a look at Stephen Vladek's Substack post that I put in, but he had a lot of really, really interesting kind of nuance about it. And one of the things that he even talks about is that the lower courts have run amok in a lot of ways. Like, this isn't somebody, and I've listened to him a couple of times and I've read a couple of his blog posts. I have a very hard time discerning like which way he leans, like he doesn't have an outwardly Republican bias and outwardly Democratic bias. I know he's a professor at Georgetown Law School and a highly regarded one in the legal community. So I just, yeah, for sure. Knowing things is gay. I have no rebuttal. Like, once you scream gay, it's over. Like, I'm done.
You might as well have said he was at Boys Town Law School.
Put some zest on it. Boys Town.
It's Charles floor. I'm done. I've already been shouted gay.
I was formulating an interesting response to what you were saying, but as soon as the word gay popped into my head, like it all just fell out. But I do wish I had
all that intellectual talk.
I wish I had looked at his Substack. But actually, dude, if you do want to like finish your thought, I'll try. I'll try and repurpose a response to it.
Oh, here's a quote from it. I'm not sure that I call a judicial decision wrongly invading that discretion illegal, since it's not violating any specific law. But it would be, in my view, an abuse of judicial power, much like, in my view, the lower court's decision that sustained Texas' effort to use federal courts to control how the Biden administration set its immigration enforcement priorities. And I know that's kind of like taken in the middle of in the paragraph, but it's him acknowledging that, it's like the lower courts have kind of run amok in a lot of ways, and it's, as he said, it's an abuse of judicial power.
Yeah, and the concept of judge shopping too has become just kind of like a big thing. Because like, if you file during the week, you don't know who you're going to get. But if you file on the weekend, there's only like one judge who is basically like, the person who receives all the new cases until Monday. And so most any like lawsuit that you see that's filed Friday night, Saturday, or Sunday, they're judge shopping 100%. It's not like a coincidence that like both of Elon's lawsuits in Delaware had the exact same judge. One, can you buy Twitter? She says no. Contract is legally binding. And then two, it's like, are you going to get the full payout from your contract according to the shareholders? And she says, no, you can't, because like that seems like an unfair contract. It's the same judge. They just shopped for someone who had like a bone to pick against him, to the point where like, if that's what you're getting from a judge, what's the point of having a court system at all?
Right. Yeah. Is it doing anything at all at that point? Yeah. I was thinking of all the Trump arraignments, and like how every dummy at each level of the court system would celebrate their respective victory, not realizing that, like, guys, it's just going up to the next court system, and eventually this is going to end up in front of the Supreme Court. But yeah, it just becomes a puppet show. It's like, look how important it is that we run all this through our judicial system, but we all know, because this is a politically charged subject, that it's going to have to go to the Supreme Court, because we just can't. We can't have any judges that we trust, or that anybody, even if they are honest and unbiased, there is one of us that's going to buy it until it goes to the Supreme Court. Everybody just starts screaming for appeal when they don't get their way.
And it makes you wonder too about back to like Vance's tweet, where he wasn't saying that we're going to absolutely defy every order that any court gives us and we're going to run amok. He didn't say that. But something that's going to sound right, like if this was some sort of nationally syndicated show and I was about to say this, you would have all of the news outlets the next day talking about how Matt just wants to subvert the rule of law. But it begs the legitimate question of, like, has the court system and judge shopping and kind of the authority of the lower district courts run amok? And should we look at some sort of reform or abolishing them to some degree? Because when courts become, like, you can take like the Roman Republic as an example. People, like, you were protected by law while you were a consul or serving in any sort of like official government position. But as soon as you were out, all of your opponents were just going to buy the courts, by the juries, by the judges, and you were going to get your comeuppance from your political opponents once you got out of power. And everyone knew that that's how the game was played. And it started to push the strain. It started to put the strain on where people were like, well, I know that I'm not supposed to run for another term, but I think I'm going to, because I know what awaits for me in these kangaroo courts as soon as I get out. And it just begs the question of, like, should we be taking if we're taking a look at everything, right? If we're looking at where USAID tax dollars or our tax dollars through USAID are going, if we're funding transgender comic books in Peru, if we're spending $20 million for Sesame Street in Iraq, should we also be looking at, like, well, what purpose do these lower district courts really serve? And after a scrutiny from people that are much smarter than us, they might say, like, yeah, well, this is like, they may not need to be abolished, but here's some reform that we could do. Or they may be like, actually, probably do without these. Who knows? But I think it's interesting that we should be looking. I think we should just look at everything. If we're in the process of tearing down the government, I think that we should be looking for any arm of it to claw out of existence. I think that's a fantastic thing.
100%. I couldn't be more excited for anyone in the government losing their job, regardless of what they do. Except for the state and national parks. Those people are cool. Everybody else.
I really do like national parks. I like state parks. Those things
It's
are
hard,
I
no
like
matter-
national forests. I like
No
those
matter how
things.
big a libertarian, anarchist-leaning, anti-government person you are, it's really hard to find something wrong with the Park Service.
Oh, I mean, some of the
Like,
personnel you can find a lot
Sure,
of problems with,
sure.
but
I mean, as far as like on the level of wanting to uproot it, I guess is what I meant.
yeah, I don't want to see
Like,
like
what a waste
America's
of funds.
beautiful-
There's part of you that's like,
Yeah.
it's all
I don't
right.
want to. Yeah, I don't want to see like national forest all of a sudden get slotted up for private development by venture capitalists. I like that there's hundreds of thousands of acres of just woods right behind me. I think that's great, and I don't want to see that disappear.
I've also never had a bad experience with anyone who works in the Park Service. I've had bad experiences with people in every other branch of the government.
Yeah, I say that because it was an employee of the National Forest Service that damn near burned down my entire town.
Fuck that guy.
It's not
Let's
It was
toss
a girl.
out. Of course it was.
It was one of those stories that as more came out, you'd be like, oh, this actually is the consequence of DEI. It's like maybe this is not a good thing.
Will you tell us what are the details that make you okay?
So long story short, very, very long story short, the manager sent out some people to do a controlled burn when all of the indicators said that you shouldn't burn. And her second in command was like, hey, let's not do this because of all of these very legitimate reasons. And essentially it was like, you're not going to challenge me. I'm in charge. I'm a strong, empowered woman. We're going to burn. And the burn got out of control. And before you know it, and that creates the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire.
Damn. Do you remember how many acres that was?
A lot, hundreds of thousands, I want to say, but who knows? Let me fact check myself.
Oh no, you don't have to. I was just curious. I vaguely remember it being over 100,000 as well.
Do you feel like that acreage is compensatory to the good feelings you get from having a female in charge of that department, representing half the gender that's been so woefully
what?
underrepresented?
I just pulled it up. It burned down 341,000 acres, destroyed over 900 structures. If that is the cost of empowering females, well then that's a fucking bargain as far as I'm concerned.
It's a Barbie world, brothers.
That's a damn good deal. I'd make that deal any day.
Have y'all seen the video of the women only roofing company?
No. Is it real or
somebody started? It went viral. Yeah, it is. It's a legitimate company that a woman started and wanted to empower women to be roofers. And I don't know that any of them have worked on roof crews before. And there's about 12 of them on a roof, taking the shingles off, kind of one at a time. And people were just destroying them in comments and putting comments of videos of Mexicans taking off an entire roof in like 30 seconds. Like,
dude, roofing sucks. I wouldn't wish that. Like, if that's if that's the consequence of feminism, that women now have to do roofing, you've been sold a bad bill of sale. It is roofing absolutely sucks. I did that in high school. I hated it. It's one of the worst jobs I've ever done. I would literally rather clean toilets than I would roof houses. It's hard. It's sweaty. It's hot. It sucks. It sucks. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's a wild choice of industries to try and like equalize the genders in,
Right.
A little bit of a respectable one though, like it's one
true.
thing when they're crying about like male CEOs versus like, oh, well, they're out there doing hard labor, I'm not gonna loft it at her for at least they're trying.
Dude, all
not
the power
doing a
to
very efficient job, it didn't look like, but they're out there and sweating.
Maybe they're still in business too.
Yeah, Godspeed to their endeavor. I wish them nothing but luck. But what a horrible job. Yeah, what a weird flex to try to equal the sexes.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, do y'all want to talk about any of the confirmation hearings today? Obviously, I haven't listened to any of them, and I'm curious if y'all have as well. But it was interesting watching myself lose another bet with you by one vote. Fucking McConnell, that goddamn snake.
You mean turtle? Get your
Yeah,
reptiles
turtle.
right.
Get your herpetological terms in line.
Get your reptiles right. All right, he's a turtle.
He's either a turtle or he's the weird thing from Labyrinth with the eyeballs on his hands. There's two.
Oh,
options.
dude, he looks so much like that thing that
It's
was.
odd how
Oh,
big
good
it is.
God.
That grabs the eyeballs off the table and walks, eats the fairy. Yeah, that he looks.
Eats the fairy.
I was
forgot about
just
that.
shocked. I thought like maybe some Democrats would have crossed the aisle for Tulsi, but it ended up being exactly what she said it was going to be, Matt. You know, her stance was questioned in regards to like the war system and the military industrial complex, whereas RFK just got a party line vote. Maybe McConnell was asleep by then and his aides checked the wrong boxes or something. I don't know.
Maybe
But,
he fell down. I know he's been falling a lot lately. Yup.
Oh, God.
There was one.
Why does he actually look like it?
That one's pretty good, where they just photoshopped his eyeball with the glasses in the hands too. It's too goddamn close. It's
He looks
weird.
just like him.
He's another one of those dudes I kind of feel bad for in the vein of like Biden, where like clearly he's not with it. He's way too old. He should have retired quite a while ago. You know, his aides are like leading him around by the hands. He has a mobility scooter every now and then. It's like, come on, bro.
Yeah, he's
We know you're not reading these bills.
Like pretty clearly had a stroke on camera twice now.
Bruh.
Or he just forgot what universe he was in for 20
real.
seconds.
Like I mean, why isn't that a constitutional crisis? There's a bunch of fucking geriatrics running this country. The average age of Congress is above like the Medicare age, and it's like I think that's probably a good cutoff. Like if you're old enough to receive Medicare, probably shouldn't be able to run for public office. I think that would be a really good way to kind of get that age down, because yeah, it's like Nancy Pelosi, Feinstein, McConnell. There's like Bernie Sanders is in his 80s. What was he doing running again? It doesn't make any sense that these people just, well, it makes perfect sense. I wouldn't want to relinquish my power too.
Maybe the age isn't the absolute best, but certainly some sort of aptitude test, like some sort of
sure.
quick IQ, like spatial reasoning puzzle to solve before you're allowed to walk in.
Yeah,
maybe just take all of the puzzles from the Legend of Zelda game, and just like you have to complete one of these before you're allowed to go in today and vote for anything.
For sure, make him play like a round of Portal 2 if they can solve.
Ooh, that's nice. Yeah,
that's like actually you got to use your brain. Like if you can get through a round of Portal 2, well, I'm sorry, you don't get to be in office.
You can't get to like level 40 of portals, and you're just not in. You're not allowed to vote anymore.
I mean, it would be nice to have them isolated and maybe just like once every term, you've got to take the test and see if you can get it. Because I was having like an interesting conversation with some of my family over like Christmas. Like my grandma has had her green card for decades. And, you know, the family's having the whole conversation. It's like, oh, should we, you know, get her to apply for citizenship or not? You know, is it time? Blah, 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 blah. But like there's citizenship questions and whatnot. And my grandma's like, how old is she, 84? Like she's at the point now where you can talk to her and she's not always 100% with it. Right. There's no way in hell she's passing a U.S. citizenship test at this point. You know, it's just she's too old. It's kind of like, guys, what's the even point? What are we even doing this for? And it'd be interesting to see Congress.
You better hurry up and get her knocked up then so she can stay.
Bro.
Not you, but like, you know, another gentleman.
Oh, not me. Yeah. No, it's fine. I mean, I wouldn't get back with an ex anyways. That's too much.
Almost spit water on my computer
screen just now. Holy shit. Suddenly incest. Whoa. Look at that good dude. That was a wild 30
Suddenly
seconds.
Incest is actually a really good novel series, though.
The John Mayer character in there. Don't worry. It's right.
Right up there with 50 Shades of Grey and like the best-selling series.
Incest. I don't know if it's that sudden. It took 6 books to get to it, but whatever.
Look, dude, some of us like the backstory more than we actually like the payoff. But it does beg the question. So I took a little peek while we were talking, Average age in the House is 59 years old. Average age in the Senate is 64 years old as of this session in January. If they were to have some sort of aptitude test at the beginning of this session, what percentage would you guess would fail that test right now?
Well, knowing that there's, I mean, how many there's 300 something representatives, and knowing the districts that they represent, I'm going to guess that it's not only the old they're going to fail that aptitude test.
True.
I was going to say that. I watched two separate.
Are
you waiting for me now since I cut you off already?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. See,
I was going to say it very well might surprise you because I watched two different Eagles fans misspell Eagles this week. One of them was the mayor of the city, which seems like the only qualification to being the mayor of Philadelphia is like being able to spell the one thing they know how to spell and all spell units together. Even where did y'all see her spell it, by the way?
No, I actually missed the Super Bowl, dude. I slept through the whole thing. I still don't even know.
You did that last year too.
This was different. No, it's not different.
You did that last year too. This is something new.
It's not different at all.
The best part was she went E-L.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Elgis. Because if you
Elagos.
I think
she missed the A. I think it was E-L-G-L-E-S. And then I heard an E-L-G-E-L-S as well this weekend. I was like, the Igelas. Let's go, Igelas. That's why I'm so upset that they won a Super Bowl. Those garbage people don't deserve
those people are so stupid.
Stupid fucking Philly humans.
But my guess is
Saquon one ring.
Well, it did.
I do love Saquon. I hate seeing him in an Eagles jersey, almost in fact, more than I hated seeing him in a Giants jersey. But he didn't deserve one, to be fair.
100% deserved one. We had to pay the cost, man. I'm okay with it. I'll let that city burn if it means Saquon.
That's what I was just about to say. The price of that ring was an entire city burning.
For real.
You know how many, speaking of aptitude tests, you know how many low IQ children are going to be born in 9 months?
Oh, in Philly?
Philly Super Bowl celebrations?
I'm sure
that there was, because that's the car we fucked on top of.
I'm sure there was probably like some hate sex against Kansas City out there that, you know, like just happy that not from Philly, not happy that Philly won, but just really happy that they didn't get the three-peat.
Well, here's another one with Philly being, I think, the worst type of white trash people. There's going to be a lot of white Saquons here in the next generation.
I like it. A little bit of confusion in the job applications.
Couple Jalen's and Saquons that are gingers running around.
Right. They're like, oh, toss it, Saquon. We're not hiring any DEIs. You find us a white guy.
Thanks. I hate white Saquons. I hate it, dude.
Jalen is already skating the line as like a white name now. You know?
Yeah, that's fair.
Saquon's crossing the boundaries too. I love it.
Cultural appropriation at its finest.
Do you think that white people capturing names like Jalen is why black people felt the need to add 7 more syllables to all of their children's names?
No, we've been doing that before y'all took Jalen. That's been around. That's actually kind of tough. But Jalen falls into that kind of like your father was in a fraternity, but you might not be kind of group. You know, like Aiden, Braden, Jaden, the same thing. You know, like that was kind of like a popular name category for like the late 2010s. And I don't like it. Zayden. This is bad. I have a cousin named Zayden. Just
for real.
I feel
yeah, it's on the line.
I feel like semi-confident saying that I could fist fight and defeat anybody named Zayden or Aiden in this entire world. I just don't think I'd physically respect anybody named Aiden.
I don't know. I bet I could find an Aiden that would kick the shit out of you.
There's definitely an NFL player named Aiden, something I'm realizing as I say that. So that guy might beat the ever-living shit out of me, to be fair.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's their badass. It's their, like, literally the scariest guy on the Lions.
Aiden Hutchinson.
God damn it. All right, I don't want to fight every Aiden in the world.
Dude, I would
also
one for sure.
Look at a picture of him. He looks like exactly what I'm talking about. His dad was in a frat. I bet it. but the name is crossing racial lines. He's
Dude,
almost got kind of a black vibe to him.
This is when I wish the show had a budget, because now it'd be like, perfect. Let's get Aiden on the phone and let's go ahead and set up that octagon.
Hey.
Logan, if you can survive 6 seconds in the ring,
Surely
Yeah,
I could
listen,
roll in the fetal position for 6 seconds before I die.
no way, dude. That guy's gonna grizzly bear you. You're
That
gonna
is
an
roll
absolutely
over and he's gonna
terrifying
snap
human
your
being.
neck.
Look, he's
That's
got a
also,
badass face
there's
going.
no advantage I have in that fight anymore. That's a bigger, faster, stronger. It's just everything's more applicable of destroying humans.
Like,
I mean, he
feel
does
like
get paid
that
to
name-
put that gigantic head into other hard objects, you know.
Oh, 100%, dude. Your size will not help you there.
Or lack thereof at that point. He's just like, I eat children you for breakfast.
Right?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Had
Yeah.
to walk that back really fast.
I knew that was but back to the question.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I guess I'm gonna go with like 30. It's gonna be a high percentage. I'm gonna say that 33% couldn't pass.
Sounds reasonable.
And I think that like in the aptitude test could be, I think, a civics test or like a citizens test. I've actually taken one before, and I had some friends that I was with take it. They did not do very well on the citizens test. They would not have passed. If they were an immigrant trying to get in this country, they would have been denied at the board and been like, sorry, try again in 4 years.
Yep. When we were having the conversation about my grandma, myself and our entire family took the citizenship test. It was just me. Nobody else got close to passing.
Dude, for real, it's not a. And I would wager it's probably a quarter to a third of Congress just is not that bright. Because I mean, think about it, right? If you're winning elections, it's
And
done
career
school equilibrium. You're appealing to the masses of whatever your district is, and let's just be honest. There's a lot of very unsmart districts out there. The Department of Education has failed us, right? Regardless of what people say, like, oh, you can't abolish the Department of Education, but my test scores have like only declined since its creation. All right, next question, please.
Yeah, and obviously, like the main skill in that job is just kind of being a tard whisperer. So, being the best person at speaking their language is how you win. It has nothing to do with engaging, in civics. And it brings up a bigger question about like the U.S. electorate as a whole. How often do you ever engage in civics at all? Like as an individual, how often is your knowledge of how the government works relevant in your day-to-day life?
I guess mine more so because I'm a cuck for, daddy government at the local level.
Oh yeah,
So-
getting your permits and your licenses.
Well, yeah, it's just that, and also just I don't know, like my years on council, and then like experiencing the bureaucracy on this side, but also like I'm still involved in a couple of committees, so it's it's a non-zero number. It's not nearly as engaged as I was when I was on council, but still gotta go to a committee meeting here or there, yada yada.
What about you, Logan?
I guess it's basically between Wednesday night and all day Thursday when I'm trying not to make an ass of myself talking about politics on this podcast. But outside of that, I don't really engage in any civic duties. I actively ignore every jury duty letter I've ever gotten, and I just let them figure it out.
The courts have issued their ruling. Let them enforce it. And Logan says as he throws his jury summons in the trash.
Yeah, let's see that bailiff come here.
Come to this house. Come to your doom. Ride to your end, sir.
Not totally fair. And for the average American citizen, I would say they probably never engage in civics in any meaningful sense whatsoever. So, of course, like we don't know how any of these things work or what they do or what judges are supposed to do, blah, 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 blah. And it would be interesting if, say, you had to renew your citizenship every 4 years if you wanted to vote. You can live here. You can do whatever you want once you've gotten in. But if you want to vote, you got to renew your citizenship. It'd be interesting to see people, and obviously people like talk about disenfranchising people. We're just talking about voter IDs and whatnot being like a roadblock. But like there should be some like serious disenfranchisement if you want
Oh,
to
absolutely.
participate
I'm a
in
firm
politics.
believer that we should be yanking as many, like we should be taking away voting rights from as many people as humanly possible. Like that should be an active goal, is to disenfranchise as many Americans as possible. Just
What would
because
be
this,
your first stipulation? If you had one stipulation you could put into being allowed to vote in the United States, what would you think would be the most effective way to get a better voting base day one?
I would say, can you
Is it
pass a
just
12th
repeal the
grade civ-
19th or
No, well, I mean, it's like the 19th is, you could repeal the 17th and kind of get the same effect without, pissing off half the population. I mean, if we're repealing amendments, let's go with the 14th too. Let's just go ahead and snag that one in there. But I would probably start with like a high school civics test. I mean, we had to take civic, I think it was 11th grade in Texas. We had to have like, go ahead and like take the final test for the year. If you can't pass that, sorry.
does it give you any pause that is a test somebody could study for?
No,
Or do you think
because
that putting in the work is
because
enough?
We want
if
them to
you,
study.
yeah,
That'd
for
be
sure.
nice.
Like if you're willing to take the time to actually study to pass a
earned it.
test, then good. Congratulations. Like I now know that you can apply yourself for a nominal amount of time to try to better yourself. Like that's great. I'm so glad that you can study and pass the test.
See, I didn't love that when you said it for Congress, like getting in the building earlier, because I was like, that feels like something that you're a congressman for 15 years. You're going to just have those memorized at some point, and you don't actually have to be intelligent. I almost would like, especially maybe specifically for the Congress example, like one of those like amalgamous IQ tests that doesn't even have an A, B, C, and D, but it's like which pattern most fits this format of continued patterns kind of thing.
For
So
sure.
it's just like, does your fucking brain work?
Yeah, and I think that you could probably come up with some sort of equivalent political test, right? Because just because somebody might not have like great spatial awareness,
That's fair too.
doesn't,
Different types of
but I
intelligence.
think that you could probably tailor the IQ test for like pattern recognition. I think that'd be very applicable. It's like, hey, A, B, and C has happened all of these times, and you get D. And now let's extrapolate this. Like, do you really want to, increase deficit spending again? It's one of the, pattern recognition actually makes sense.
And also, like, even if people have the answers memorized, like the tests serve as kind of like a primer almost. You're coloring the water by whatever questions you ask and whatever the answers are, to the point where, like, you're going to get some junior member of Congress standing up as like, but remember question 13. And, maybe that ends up like coloring the votes or coloring the way people actually end up handling themselves. And if all the questions are just basic civic duties of like what you can and can't do, there's a chance that you might end up influencing members to push back on things that we want them to push back on anyways, because it's their fucking job. So I think there's definitely a lot of benefit in that sense as well. And also, as far as like my answer to the question is like the one change to the electorate, it would just make it so you either have to serve in the military or be like a net positive taxpayer to vote. One of the two.
I always kind of, I mean, back in the, and now we all kind of shake our fists at it and go like, can you believe that only white men could vote? And it's like, it wasn't exactly white men though. It was like white landowners. And obviously we need to get rid of the ethnic specific part of that. But there is something to like having a stake in the game and being a contributor to society. Cause it's like, I don't know, if you're only collecting welfare and haven't had a job in 20 years and you've never been a leader of any men, like on what level do we really need your opinion to decide what the best way to run the country is?
Yeah, certainly. And the landowner thing was interesting back in the day because like, travel was a lot more difficult. It wasn't like now where say like I can decide like, oh, I'm just going to pick up and move to a different city. And I've lived in a bunch of different cities around Texas, basically every city except San Antonio. Fairly easy, but like in the past, it was much more difficult. And, landowner brings some interesting questions as well. Is if someone has a vacation home, are they a landowner? Can you only vote where you have your primary residence? And then are people going to be like gaming their primary residence just to like control, like, I don't know, like some tiny island in Hawaii? You can go there and there's like 10,000 people who live in the town of Hilo. You claim that as your residence, even though you live in Arizona for 7 months a year, just so you have a stronger say in like the Senate race. I don't know. It'd be some interesting questions that get brought up in the ways that people are very transient now that they didn't used to be. But it would still create like a very interesting stake for people to decide about how they became part of a community, Because right now, what's the incentive for buying land? Like, if you were to think of some, like, why would you want to own a house?
Yeah, building, construction, farming, and those kind of things, rural pursuits that most people aren't interested in anyway. But yeah, that's fair. I like that. Maybe the tax positive one is a little bit better of a measure, because owning land itself is not really the end goal like it was back when that was established. That was kind of what everybody was here for, was like, where are you going to carve your piece out of the West or establish your industry here in this new country? So it's maybe a little more of a measure of success then.
I would also say that if you tied voting to land ownership, then there'd be a sudden, like, another incentive for why you buy land that's bigger than just the monetary of like, I want to build a house, or like
now it's
the real thing
as well.
say. Oh yeah, it's like I'm choosing the community that I'm going to be part of full time, and then I'm actually going to contribute to and be part of. You might think of it that way. Instead, like, people have horrible answers for why they want to buy property. It's like, it's an investment. Fucking dumb.
I did think about that with I think it's in Scotland. There's a company that sells
to be a lord.
Like, yeah, exactly. It's like a quarter-inch plot of land so that you can get your lordship. I wonder how long before you see that, where there's some conservative or liberal think tank opening up a plot of land somewhere where they're like, yeah, everybody come buy a piece of this, this tiny minuscule part for a penny. All you got to do is show that you're a registered Republican before you buy here in California. Turn the state red,
It would be really interesting, because I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's this Netflix documentary a long time ago about this cult that popped up in Wyoming. And they bought some land, and it was like unincorporated, but in the county. And nobody lived in the county, very small.
Just like shipping the homeless people in.
No, they shipped in their cult members, and they started winning elections, and they got on like the board of everything, just so they had like control over like what their cult could do, how they could incorporate it and whatnot. And like, it actually worked really well in like a very interesting way that people just don't think about. And I know that was the whole like Free State Project in New Hampshire. Let's have all the libertarians move to one state. That way we can like maybe control the government. It kind of worked, but if
They
you're
got
going
bears.
to decide, so
They unfortunately picked New Hampshire.
still
So
bears.
They got bears.
Blackberries. They barely even do anything. No one's worried about blackberries. It's I would say people are concerned about black bears, just their heads are screwed on wrong. They're basically friends. They're like big dogs. They're probably safer than pit bulls, if we're gonna be totally honest.
Yeah, black bears only make up like 13% of bear attacks, I think, yearly. So it's not even
Despite making up 52% of the bear population, they only perform 13% of the attacks.
I don't know where I got that number from, but it's really sticking out to me.
The 13? Oh wow. Okay, this is wild. So I just Googled it really quick. Pit bulls are actually more dangerous than black bears.
But you don't see all these. Would you rather run into a pit bull or a man on a trail?
I don't know. I've never seen a black bear that I thought I might be able to win a hand-to-hand combat altercation with. I think I got a shot against a pit bull.
400 people were killed by pit bulls last year.
400?
50 were killed by black bears. Now, I know obviously pit bull's a pet. It sees people a lot more often than black bears. But still, it's absolutely wild to me.
I think that's a crazy number. I would not have guessed that is this in the United States?
Just the U.S. This is only
I
American.
cannot believe that 400 people were killed by pit bulls last year. That is an insane number. 400 people.
It's kind of wild.
That is insane.
I wasn't as surprised by that because I've seen that before. I was trying to look it up.
Okay, hold on. I gave you all the wrong information. This is over a 12-year period. There were 48 fatal, and this is all bears, not just black bears. So it's black, grizzly, and polar bears. 48 fatal attacks, and then 400 Rottweilers and pit bulls in that same 12-year span.
Okay, gotcha. So last year, 400 Americans did not get their face mauled.
Yeah.
Okay,
that would be one a day, which would be pretty wild. I Had to open
This
it.
is
The
why
headline was scary.
It's fair.
This is why it didn't exactly scare me, because I've seen this statistic before, or a similar one. From 2005 to 2017, pit bulls were responsible for 284 deaths. That was the number one. Number two is Rottweilers with 45 deaths. Pit bulls, they're effective.
They're good at
They're responsible
what they
for
do.
Almost tenfold the next dog's killing rate.
It's also wild to me that there's like people who will genuinely see stats like this and say it's not the breed, it's how you raise them. When it's like I've watched people beat Chihuahuas. I have never seen anyone get mauled by a Chihuahua before, ever. And there's other dogs.
Now,
too
that is a semantical argument based on the level of mauling, because plenty of Chihuahuas have attempted to maul me in my lifetime.
Fair. I've also never seen a Chihuahua play bite anyone. They're all serious bites. Every single one, they're trying to draw blood. It's kind of wild.
There's a little bit of a small dog thing with that. I don't know if it's like a fear thing or what, but my little Scotty's that way. She just bites the ever living shit out of you when you're trying to play with her and just draws blood. And it's not my favorite trait.
Yeah, honestly, it's not. They're really not endearing themselves to the population. They're just lucky they aren't pit bull sized. Otherwise, we'd be talking about like a Chihuahua ban, and I'd be all for it.
For sure, we'd be putting them down.
I wouldn't. I'll go for it.
No,
I thought that was part of this, like, sending them all back to Mexico thing. Are we going to start Chihuahuas here after that?
No, the dogs can stay. We've already established that.
You did say that a few episodes ago.
But not those Mexican hairless ones. They're gross.
The dogs are fine. I caught the tail end of what you guys were talking about, like tying voting rights to land, and it just kind of like brought me back to this idea when I was listening to everyone screaming about constitutional crisis. It's like, why should I listen to the plebs and the masses about constitutional crisis? Like, and I say this in all seriousness. When's the last time that you guys have like read the Constitution? I picked it up a couple of weeks ago to read a specific section. The last time I've read the Constitution start to finish, it's got to be over a decade ago.
2017, long time ago.
It's been a long time since I've actually like picked it up and like, I'm just going to read the Constitution because I need to know what my rights are as a citizen. Nope, haven't done it in a very long time. I will read sections when it's applicable to like what we're researching and talking about, but think about when's the last time like anybody, like the vast majority of people have even looked at like a section, an amendment, anything. And so I have a very hard time taking serious the cries of constitutional crisis. Like, you don't even know what's in the Constitution. You can pass the citizen
specifically, and especially when it's coming from the left, who just cheered on all of the madness of lockdowns and printing all the money in the world and exacerbating the war in Ukraine. It's like, at what point did you guys start becoming concerned with the Constitution? Was it just when Trump's in charge? Because I could find quite a few what I would consider constitutional violations in this last regime, and I didn't hear a peep about it from the left then. So it's just I mean, again, that's kind of what I was saying earlier. It ends up ringing so hollow because they've overused the terms. Everything's been a crisis, and at this point, they've run out of their worst naughty words, and they're using less light language. So it's like, I don't know, how am I supposed to get upset about this if I already decided I'm not upset about you calling him a Nazi?
Yeah, and everybody kind of gets to determine what their brand is. And when you step outside of your brand, for the most part, we don't really care. So, you know, when the leftists are saying something about like trans rights or something, like, I get it. They actually really care about that stuff. When they're talking about like gun rights for communists, like, it just does not ring.
Communists aren't people,
Doesn't ring
so
true.
we don't care.
It's just, you know, if you've spent like a long enough time crying wolf and there's no wolf, we're not coming running when you say wolf. It's just not your bag, you know? And I think that's one interesting thing about like the position the left has put themselves in, is that like every brand name that they've decided to associate with themselves is just something that's really kind of useless in terms of actually like moving the electorate in terms of like what the government's doing. They're not the constitutional people. They're not the military people. They're not armed forces people. They're not the borders people. Like, what are they? What's their actual brand? They're not the budgets people either. Like, they don't have a single good brand beyond just like maps, minor attracted persons, You know?
Yeah.
As we put them against the wall and say, no, you're just a pedophile.
Essentially, man, it's just bad branding overall. Like they
No.
gave up a lot of good ground, I would say.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And when you start screaming about things that are outside of your lane, I have a really hard time taking you seriously. Like you're talking about. It would be a lot more compelling if there were the same voices that are screaming constitutional crisis were also saying that when Joe Biden tries to do this, or Joe Biden tries to do this, or Obama tried to do stuff, right?
Yeah, the student loan thing.
It would have made so much more sense. And I think that Americans in general would be more willing to listen to those voices if it wasn't just be like, oh, but my federal government, why, like, you can't look at the books. That's the no, you can't. Like, did you guys see that White House executive order saying that we believe that there are over 400 federal agencies, though we don't know the exact number. The fact that they said that, the fact that they said that, and granted, I'm not going to just take that as the word of God because it came from Daddy Trump. You know what I mean? He is very hyperbolic. So maybe they know exactly how many there are and he chose to frame it that way. But still, the fact that there are 400 plus federal agencies and they've just been running amok, that's not a problem to anybody. And I understand that what Doge will do, like the cuts that they're going to make, in terms of like our deficit spending, our entitlement programs, the interest owed on current debt, military spending. I mean, we're talking about shaving off maybe like weeks, maybe a month of borrowing, which begs the question too. It's like that goes to the fact that it's like one day we will become insolvent and the monetary policy, it will collapse. It's only inevitable. Probably not in our, might be in our lifetime. Probably not. We still have enough hard power in the form of nukes and aircraft carriers to stave that one off for a while. But I think it's so fascinating, the resistance to actually getting in and seeing what your tax dollars are going to. And I know that everybody has their own relationship with taxes. If you get a tax return, it's a lot easier to be like,
I was going to say, I don't know if I consider rape a relationship, but
it's to a degree.
He buys me dinner though.
From the strictest definition, it's a toxic one. It's it's very one-sided, but
that's fair. Technically,
it's
kind of a form of relationship,
but it's not a good one. But I know that a lot of people, like if you're a W-2 employee, your relationship with the taxes are like, oh, I see it withheld out of my check, and if I'm lucky, I get a tax return. When you get on the other side of that, and by no means, like I do not make a ton of money, but every year I dread, like I hate this time of year because my accountant is going to tell me how much I owe in taxes, and it doesn't matter the prepayments I made into the system, it's never enough. Every April, I'm told you owe way more money than you probably have in your bank account. Good luck, figure it out. And I think that because a lot of people's relationships with taxes are like, oh, it's taken out my paycheck, I see it, and then I get a tax return. It doesn't sting nearly as much when you have to write the big check every year or call the IRS and have to be like, hey, I can't make this payment. So what's a payment plan option? You know what I mean? Like there's a big difference. And I think for a lot of people, they're screaming about like, you can't cut the federal government. It's like, dude, I want it all gutted, like tear it down limb from limb, because I'm tired of paying taxes. I fucking hate taxes.
There's a lot of that. I heard somebody say that recently, that if the government started taking your kids into school at 2 years old and had a class about walking, it would take one generation before we thought it was impossible to learn how to walk without the government's help. It's kind of that same thing. Like the relationship they have with their taxes is, oh, it's tax season. It's cool. I get a tax return. But they're not conceptualizing because it's just part of the paycheck. There's a bunch of numbers on it. And at the bottom, it says what I get to put in my bank account there. And whatever, they don't really examine the idea that like, no, this is 30% of your wealth that was taken from your paycheck by your government. and then spent on shrimp and treadmills and buying subscriptions to Politico to keep a left-wing podcast floating that nobody listens to.
For sure.
Absolutely. And we also have to keep in context that we're like 3 weeks in to Doge, and they've utterly hit the ground running. It's a fantastic pace. And I suspect that the fierce resistance to even beginning an audit process is because there is the idea of where does this go from here if once Doge actually wins and they're able to get an audit on the Treasury or audits on smaller executive branches like USAID, which is kind of like an outpost, even though it's a gigantic outpost for fraud, and I think it was 0.7% of the budget, which is a lot, but not really ticking the surface yet. Doge is supposed to be around for, I believe, 18 months or something, and they're going to hang up the cleats. If they continue this pace, how far do they get? How many other cuts do we get? How deep do these cuts actually get? How big is this level of fraud and waste? How many people are on the teat, so to speak, just sucking that milk from daddy government, which is just taxpayer money that's being repurposed from us? I think all of us, myself included, have no understanding of how deep or expansive these cuts might end up being by the end of it, once all is said and done. And I think we definitely need to keep that in perspective, especially since it's week 3. This is probably the most efficient run through we've ever seen from anyone in any government agency. And also speaking to the experience of just paying taxes, I'm sure you know this, Matt, and you probably do too, Logan. But in the 40s, during World War II, they had an issue where people weren't paying taxes because back then everyone had to pay taxes in tax season. You had to do your own books and then you had to send the money in. There was no pre-collection. The government wasn't taking money out of paychecks at that point. And then they kind of realized that oh, hey, this will be a lot more popular if we take it from the paychecks before it ever gets down to the plebs or the serfs. We'll get much better rates of payment from people who might not be capable of calculating their taxes on their own and being responsible enough to set money aside to be ready in tax season. And, all of that was true, but it also disconnected the populace as a whole from taxes, which is why, the top tax bracket in the 40s was 16% or something tiny. That might even be high. It might have been in the single digits. And then suddenly, once you're taking it from paychecks, ratchet that shit up. Top tax bracket can be 35%, and then toss a state tax on top of that to the point where you can have a 55% tax bracket for your highest amount. And if it's all gone before you ever see it, maybe it hurts less and it's easier to take a position of oh, this isn't so bad. But when you actually see how much you're losing to the government, I remember my first big boy job. I paid more to the government than I paid in rent, every single month. And that was just a very weird experience to me because, outside on government streets, and to be fair, it's state and city government, the street was cracked. There was a gigantic crack in the street, right in front of my driveway to get in. And you either had to slow down or kind of go around it on this little 2-lane road. Otherwise, part of your car would fall in. It was just
you could have
the craziest
ironically
crack
taken the same amount of money in singles and just stuffed it into that crack and fixed it with $1.
It would have been way better for sure. Or
you would have saved $2 grand.
Giving you the biggest bang for your bucks. Just start shoveling pennies in there.
From an engineering perspective, I think you'd want a mat of $1 bills, and then you'd want a layer of quarters, and then alternate, and then get a little fill in, get some penny shavings just to fill in the space.
For sure.
There's just crackheads like pigeons accumulating behind you as you're putting this together,
just digging in this hole in the street,
bobbing their heads up and down.
But it's I remember it was earlier, I guess it was almost a year ago, but I ran into one of my good friends, and he was in a foul mood because he's just written his tax check for the year, and it was the same day that the United States had authorized in their aid package to either Israel or Ukraine in the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars, and he was so angry. I think it's so much of the extent is the least they can do is send me a picture of the dead child that my tax dollars are going to kill, so I can put it on my fridge, so I can at least know what my tax dollars went to. He's like, it's going to kill somebody somewhere. He's like, the least they can do is like, it's like, this child lived in this address in Gaza, and this was his name, and his favorite sport was. He's like, the least they could do is like send me that. If they're going to
just thinking about showing somebody the home walkthrough on Zillow of the collapsed house, like it was a 3-bedroom. You can see right here.
This was the nursery.
Missile strike.
Little Abdul died in this corner when the roof caved in and collapsed on his crib.
A family of orphans actually moved in after your last year's contribution caved in their roof.
Right.
Now, this wasn't actually the entirely my tax money, but I am the majority owner of this house.
It's but I think that maybe like what you were talking about earlier, Logan, is kind of like the resistance from some people. I think that it just has to do, like, your relationship to everything matters, and I think that once you start writing tax checks and you start dreading April, where it's not like, oh, it's refund season, but it's like, oh, here comes my government dicking. You start to be a lot more open to the idea of starting to go through these agencies and purge them. And I know that it's not like a direct one-to-one. I just think that a lot of the resistance just comes from being so disassociated with everything. It reminds me of somebody that's gonna be like, oh, why would you go kill an animal? Like, you can just go to the grocery store and buy meat. It's like you're so far removed from the process of what happens. Go ahead.
I've got a good one of those. I was telling a story to somebody about a friend of mine who worked in restaurants with me, and he walked in one morning at 5 o'clock to somebody trying to open the safe, and he was a concealed carry guy, so he pulled his gun out, told the guy to put his hands up, and the guy spun around and put a hand in his pocket, so he shot him and killed him. And the cops got there and whatever, pursed it out. And as I was telling the story to a liberal friend of mine, she goes, why didn't he shoot him in the leg? Because that's how you die in a gunfight. That's not, you don't understand the stakes here, but it's not being completely removed from it. It's like a question, well, why didn't he just shoot him in his trigger finger like John Wick would, so that he wasn't able to shoot him back? I've seen Clint Eastwood do it a million times.
The barrel.
Yeah, just hit his bullet in the air like in Wanted, and move on with your life. Everybody,
everyone's okay.
Disarm him with your bare hands.
Criminal rights, yeah. Like if you're a real man, you don't need to. I think, and that's probably a function, right? I mean, when people, because I used to be somebody that when they say abolish the Department of Education, years ago, I would have been the person that's like, well, education is important. And I still believe that. I think that as a society, we should heavily invest in education. However,
man, you watch 10 minutes of TikToks from Generation Alpha and you'll change your mind about our education system.
That it's great?
That it's going horribly.
Well, I know that it's horrific. I was like, is there a counter?
Gotcha.
Something I don't know?
If you were someone who supported our education.
Well, no, it's like I'm down with educate, and I want a society to care about education, right? But if you would have talked to me, 5-6 years ago before we started this podcast, I would have been, well, we can't abolish the Department of Education. This is really important. And then once you start looking into it, it's like, well, then why has everything gone down? The only thing that's gone up is the amount of expenditures on, administrative costs and bureaucracy versus there's no measurable metric that is better since the DOE has been established.
Yeah, correlation isn't causation, but school shootings as well coincides with that.
Oh, interesting. Never thought about that one.
Let the government take over and put you in a concentration camp to learn how to be a good office worker, and you lose your fucking mind.
It does kind of make sense. Because, when was the Department of Education created? Like the 70s or the 80s?
Late 80s, I want to say. Mid to late 80s.
It's perfectly timed for that chart. You get Columbine in the 90s and then just whoop. And I'm sure if you look at the Department of Education's funding chart, it's probably whoop, same upward line of just correlation right there.
That'd be a wild one if we end up cutting the Department of Education and we just stop having school shootings. That's going to be a really jarring, weird,
Dude.
like, huh? Guess
It's
that's
like-
a benefit I
I guess
didn't
we
see
should
coming.
probably look into that one. I was like, that's weird. It's like, what is it about dehumanizing children and making them shut up, sit down in the, the most stimulating age of humanity to just do their schoolwork? I wonder why that drives them crazy. They're going to kill each other. It's bizarre.
It is an interesting exercise for everyone who does have a W-2 to kind of look and see the W-2 for this past year. They should all have them by now. Just look and see what their contributions were to the federal government on their W-2, and then just look at the budgets for few departments, look at the cost for a single Hellfire missile, maybe watch a few videos of civilians getting drone striked, and try and see like how many years of your own life would it take just to kill 11 civilians in Afghanistan. Because it's a lot. It's a big
It's a
number.
lot. It's a huge. It's
117,000.
I would wager that it's like if you're like the tax deductions, it would be a sizable portion of your working career to kill 20
100%.
people overseas with your tax dollars. It's a lot of work.
Each missile
you wanna
strike is
keep our-
117K.
Yeah.
How many
I'll say
years
you
does
wanna
it take you
keep
to
our
contribute
soldiers safe, so
117?
we launch hundreds of thousands of dollars into those poor goat farmers' hovels.
And what the military does is kind of like the easiest place to see government waste, because like we're not fighting a defensive war. So like for the most part, everyone agrees that like we don't need to defend the opium fields that USAID paid for. How much did it cost us to plant the opium fields? Like that's been released. I forgot the number, but it was more than I'll ever pay into federal government in my lifetime, unless I am extremely lucky. Any sort of branch we look into, it's just awful when you contextualize the number in a human life, a single human life, which is obviously why we have a $36 trillion deficit, debt. And then on top of that, we have a yearly deficit every single year. And it would be interesting for, say, someone who's listening to go look at a W-2 and then look at any single branch that right now they might think is necessary. And then ask yourself, like, could they do without me for 1 year? And the answer to almost every single branch is yes.
Absolutely.
Except for maybe state and national parks. And, actually, I'm curious, how much do the national parks cost us every year?
I don't
I
know.
know they run at a loss. Let's
That's-
see.
God bless Teddy Roosevelt for that.
I was looking at a graph of the school shootings through the years, and we had a little bit of a lull in the 90s because the 90s were super sweet. And then right after 9/11, we all got along for a little while, and we were shooting Muslims instead of each other for a second there.
Okay, actually, we spend $3 billion a year on the national parks.
3.57 is what I found.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I'm
starting to turn against the park system now. That seems like a little high
Yeah,
budget
this
for
seems
putting a
like a
fence
bit
around
much.
some grass.
Down with those trees.
Yeah, what are you guys actually doing out there? Aren't we just not letting people drive on the grass? Isn't that basically what's going on?
It's like, wait a minute. Well, I don't like trees anymore. Fuck
I
them
don't know if I
glaciers.
care about them that much.
This is a lot. I mean, like trees, they know how to suck in sunlight without us, right? They've got that down. Like
I do think
what
they
we
do that without the government's help, if I remember correctly. Yes.
It does beg the question, like, where is all that going actually?
So this is a quick breakdown of the fiscal year 2025.
There's some park ranger with a golden
3.09
toilet.
billion dollars for visitor services, resource stewardship, which God knows what that means, park protection, facility maintenance, park support, and external administrative cost.
How is park
200
protection $456 million?
It was part of 3.1 billion. It's lumped in there. Then we have 237 million for construction, special programs, construction planning, yada yada. 13 million to support
Even that,
partnerships.
when you consider they're operating at a loss, and maybe I'm ignorant to like the amount of money it's cutting into it for all the park services, but it's like, I don't know, it's a national park. Let people take a tent out there. Why are you building a multi-billion-dollar visitor center? Do we need that for people to enjoy nature?
Yeah, I mean the visitor centers are usually at the start.
I'm okay with the visitor centers.
I mean, I know that it's like there are certain places that I don't mind the funnel, right? Like I'm a firm believer in gatekeeping, Like one of the worst things that has happened in our society is that more things have become accessible to everybody, and they shouldn't. I think we should gatekeep as many things as possible. And I'd like the funnel of a visitor center, because like if you go to Moab, right, there's places that are open to romp and rage, but there's also places like don't go stepping out there because this is don't break the crust, as they say. Because as soon as you break the crust, you're disrupting an ecosystem. I'm down with that, right? Like stay on your pre-approved trail and spew all of the diesel and gas and burn your rubber on, you know what I mean? Like there's a space for you to do those destructive things. So I like the funnel. I like the visitor center, just to educate people. Don't be a hoodlum. And maybe if
the buffalo don't actually want you to pet them.
And maybe if, as you argue, we were a more educated society that was a little bit higher on the consciousness level, that accepted personal responsibility, then you wouldn't need visitor centers, because everybody that goes to these parks would be like, oh, well, I'm here to be a good steward of it, instead of be like, well, my barbecue and stuff.
Hey, Marianne, this buffalo's eating Oreos right out of my hand.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's interesting too, because like obviously national parks compared to the rest of the budget, this is like not the kind of thing we should care about. But still, I like the idea of Doge looking at them anyways, just in case. Like we don't know. I mean, 450 million. There's 63 national parks. I did the math real quick. We're spending $7 million a year protecting them. Sounds like a lot as far as like protection goes, but I get some of them are big. Like Yellowstone, it's the size of fucking New Jersey. It's a gigantic place.
It's massive.
And, like, having that visitor center there is nice. It's right next to Old Faithful, which is the thing 90% of people are there to see. They're not there to like go ride horses around Lake Yellowstone, which is this gigantic place, which is for the most part undeveloped, and that's kind of nice. And maybe a large national park like that does suck up a lot of resources protection-wise, but I just have trouble really seeing it. And it would be nice to see that if nothing is truly safe, and actually treating like our tax dollars like they really matter.
Sure. And that's totally fair. And I would imagine, like, let's say in this perfect world, all of a sudden the sins of our government are laid bare and we get to see where all of the money is going. We might look at certain things and be like, well, we're okay with this, right? Like if you could, like, let's say if you could slash $100 billion out of the defense budget, like, do we really care? And that's not just that's not to justify, but like if you could see a line item expenditure of everything the federal government spends money on, we might start to find things that's like, well, is this the best use of our dollars? Maybe not. However, we're okay with this, right? We're okay with a little bit of overspending here, right? It's like, I like national parks. And we also slashed $100 billion out of the defense budget. So as far as I'm concerned, we're up $97 billion, and we move on. It's not to say that it shouldn't be examined. I think it should be.
I definitely did get that take today of like, we just need transparency. We don't need to be just randomly cutting agencies. And I was like, well, what about, these things? And they're like, no, I guess I see why those should have been cut. It's like, so you're just whining then. You're just mad at kind of the fact that the guy you don't like is doing it, but you don't really have a defense for any of these examples that were cut. You're just mad that things are getting cut by the guy that's the boogeyman.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that like our relationship to this is kind of like the same relationship that you would have with like a meaningful woman in your life, girlfriend, wife, or husband, boyfriend, in much the same way that there's an unrealistic way you can look at them where you say like they should be perfect. I want X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And then there's like you have the real person in front of you, and they might have some flaws that you'd like to change, but you accept them with those flaws. And I feel like our government is kind of the same, where some of these things are things that we're okay with not being perfect on. Some of them are okay where they're not good. Some of them it's like, well, if the government never changes this, I could live. Like,
I guess that's fair for you, but I personally think I deserve a hotter government.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I think
we're bringing in Ana Franquez. We're bringing her back.
Dude, ate
Open the borders.
the onion on that one, dude. It's like,
Me too.
dude, that picture made me rethink my entire worldview. It's like, do we really want to be deporting all of these people? It's like maybe there's, it's like, maybe Trump's at control. It's like,
Maybe
I'm not
we
saying
have
I would
some tribunal of bros that has the final say on female deportations.
Absolutely. My view on the border is the same as the Titanic. Women and children first, but maybe not the children. We'll bring them all in. We're trying to save the most vulnerable among other societies.
There's you know why they evacuate women and children first in a disaster, right? So the men can think of a solution in silence. But in all seriousness, I think that your analogy is correct, right? Nothing is perfect, and I think the strive. This is one of those like don't let perfect be the enemy of good, especially the idea of perfect, right? It's like, is the Trump administration going to bat 1,000 over this administration? No way. There's going to be a lot of things that I'm going to be very upset about. There's going to, he's reaching and he's just hoping somebody reins him in. Eventually, he's going to reach for something that I don't like, and he's going to get to keep it. And it's not going to be good for the longevity of this country. However, just because there's a possibility of the administration doing something we don't like shouldn't preclude and obscure the fact that this is the first serious look that somebody has taken at government spending in quite some time. Like the example I gave earlier in the text thread, like the Simmons Bowles Congressional Commission, like it didn't even make it out of committee. They had to get a super majority, and there was only like 21 of them in the committee. So they only needed 15 votes? They couldn't even get enough votes in the commission to get it to the floor of the House for a yes or no vote to try to get government spending under control. And that was over 15 years ago. I would wager that most people have never heard of that. And I have only heard of that because of one of the shows I listened to talked about it a week ago. And when he said it, I was just like, what the hell is this? And I looked into it, I was like, well, I'll be. And so this is the first time that, and God knows how long, that somebody's trying to cut back on the federal government. And so I'm all for it. I get it. Do we want the world's richest, most powerful man? It's like, I hear you. I hear all of those concerns. I'm down with them. However, well, it's what's the alternative?
That was one. It sounds like you kind of answered this question already, but that was one I wanted to get off before we got out of here. Is kind of like the precedent that this is setting, the obvious acceleration and like the use of executive powers to get things done. If we have a Josh Shapiro in 4 years, like I would fully expect him to try to reestablish almost everything that was undone by Doge, and especially if it happens in the next election, because they're going to take that as a proof positive that people have turned away from the conservative leanings that we've kind of turned back to. But I do wonder about kind of the precedent that's being set of the way we're using powers at the top, the way we're, hey, here's this big game plan, and here's the new the new polling position, so to speak. Like the bar just got set pretty high for your first 2 months as a president. Like you better hit the ground running if you want to compete with what Trump was able to accomplish in this amount of time. And I'm sure that they're gonna have plenty of things that they want to undo if they are lucky enough to be in the position to do so in the next 4 years. So I guess my question kind of comes down to like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Are there enough things going the direction you like right now that you're kind of willing to overlook those larger implications of what it might mean for the next guy that takes over and what they think they can get away with the use of executive power?
Yes, I'll end. Yeah, if you don't mind. Yes, it is very worth the squeeze. Why? And if we run into a world where the Supreme Court starts ordering rulings or, passing down rulings, and the Trump administration starts openly defying them, then we have actually entered the constitutional crisis, Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon. And at that point, the juice is not worth the squeeze. But let's say that the Trump administration continues on its thing, Doge keeps on doing, court rulings come down, say, oh, you can't do that. Yes, this is what within your purview as the executive branch. Here, we're not sure. We'll come back to that. Then, yeah, for sure. Then the system is holding up, and it's very well worth the squeeze. Like, until it actually breaks, right? Until you have, and this is the thing that I know we didn't talk about it. I know we focused the title around this, but we didn't talk about it all that much. But just tweeting that, well, this is the executive's authority and the court sent, that's not a constitutional crisis. That's just a tweet. And I actually don't think that it's that outrageous of a tweet. But let's say that the Supreme Court says, Donald Trump, you can't do this, and he continues to do that. Well, then congratulations. Now we're in a full-blown constitutional crisis. And I guess we'll see what backbone Americans have to try to stomach this. Will we openly revolt? Will we write our congressman furiously? Will we just bitch to our neighbors and do nothing as we continue on with our lives? I don't know, but until there is an actual breaking of the guardrails that have been established through precedent, then absolutely worth the squeeze.
I would also say that Biden already did this, so we already know what the American public's going to do. When the Supreme Court ruled that he couldn't actually forgive student loan debts, and he did it anyways, nobody did anything. We're just kind of like, oh, okay. And life moved on anyways. The dam isn't broken. Nobody seems to care about the constitutional crisis unless they're told to care. So, when it comes around to the next administration, we'll see. But I also think this breakneck pace that the Trump administration is working on is kind of a function of the vitality of the members within his administration. I'm not really worried about anyone using this for evil in the future, because every single entity I've seen who's kind of a member of the deep state, whether it's the right or left, they've all been kind of slow, weak, lazy, just kind of used to kind of getting money from speaking fees and engagements. They don't do anything.
This is a J.R.R. Tolkien concept that evil is always a corruptive and corrosive force. It drains your energy even when it gives you power.
I believe so, but not in that sense. Just kind of in the sense that if you really had to kind of work and scrap for everything, and kind of if forces are always arrayed against you, you're going to be sharp just by your life experience. Whereas if you're within the system and you're living in the system, and the system is constantly holding you up and giving you handouts, you're going to move slow by definition because you've never had to move fast. So whoever
you're always looking behind to see which direction the lobbyist is pushing you.
Absolutely, man. So even if we set precedent for what they need to do in the future, I'm not so worried about them. I think it's more important that we use this time we have now to get as much out of it as possible, and to make as much of it as undoable as possible. Because there's certain things that really can't come back very easily. I mean, obviously, the USAID stuff, that could actually come back pretty easily because nobody pays attention whenever that stuff gets passed. But if we create some new processes that are kind of audit proof, especially where Social Security payments are concerned, Medicare, Medicaid, I think it'll be very difficult to roll back some of the necessary audit functions from that, and just hey, we're going to get rid of the oversight system. Hey, we're going to allow double payments again. That stuff, it's going to be impossible to justify. And I think, getting that is 100% worth it. But yeah, we'll be paying for transgender surgery, scar lightening in North Korea within 5 years. I have no doubt about that. Doing what we can.
That was kind of the follow-up I was thinking. That again, you kind of got to the answer before I even asked it. But what do you guys think is your confidence level and the staying power of everything Doge is pulling off right now? Do we think that we're going to see Josh Shapiro potentially in 4 years just go ahead and spend his first 100 days re-implementing all this stuff and spending all of our money once again, and probably causing larger expenditures because they're retraining and rehiring all these positions again? Some of these people went to the private sector. Or do you think that there are some true long-standing, and maybe that's not exactly a question for right now, because maybe it means a lot more of how well this is handled by this administration and how well the citizenry gets behind it by the end of it?
Yeah, I don't think that I don't know if Josh Shapiro is quite the person I would insert into this. He doesn't strike like I know he's a Democrat, but he doesn't strike me as like a radical leftist Democrat that's just going to try to undo everything that Donald Trump did. I mean, this is a guy that pushed through school vouchers in Pennsylvania. That's not a
Right.
left wing idea. That's so I don't know if like, but
I guess
for you,
to be
for
fair,
your
I was
point,
just kind
though,
of picking who's at the top of the
sure,
ticket for their next
yeah.
nomination.
No, I
Really.
understand the sentiment. I I think that to Kiefer's point that there are going to be certain things like if you can get them undone, and now that people are paying attention, it's going to be very hard to get them re-implemented, even under a new administration. What I would really like to see Doge do, and this is not a unique idea. I heard this from somebody Substack that I read. I would love to see a full breakdown, like once a week. Um, Elon Musk gets in front of the American people and goes through like line item by line item and is very and he talks about transparency, but it's kind of hard to, you know what I mean? It's like the only things that we can find are the things that he's chosen to share with us. But it would be awesome that as time goes on to have like this weekly account, like almost like the fireside chats that FDR did, where he's like, "Hey, American, this is what your tax dollars have been funding." And you can go to the website and you can see everything that we found. And it would be really awesome to see him sit there and address reporters. I think it's awesome that he was in the Oval Office talking to reporters because like you want the world's most powerful and richest man from many different metrics actually answer questions from the press. Like you don't want that dude hidden away in a dark cave just doing what he wants. And so it'd be awesome to have that sort of accountability where they go through line item by line item. And I think that if they were to do that in 4 years, it would be really hard to roll back a lot of those things because I think the average American would pick up, be like, even though I might not like, I'm just trying to insert average American. It's like, well, I don't like Elon Musk and I don't really like Donald Trump. However, I'm not upset that he found, X program that spent X hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think that if you slowly did that, if you could do that consistently for 4 years, I think the staying power might be generations, it might be 2-3 generations before some of that stuff could come back.
Yeah, and you talk about a cultural impact. It probably goes against everything I was preaching about. Like, oh, it's not about infiltrating the Republicans to get the message out there. It's about preaching on your podcast that nobody listens to until eventually you become super famous. But yeah, the lesson that could be learned from this, to your point, if you sit down and really break down the absurd expenditures of our system and what is being called humanitarian expenditures, that it's just going to absolutely ridiculous things, and really break down for people how just an absolute waste of their money a lot of this is. That might be the best post-libertarian argument I've heard so far, of like, hey, how about you stick your foot in your mouth and get on board with this post-libertarian stuff?
No, I'm not necessarily I'm not going to say that, man. I might be very wrong. I am wrong daily. And I might have to eat crow on this one. So you don't have to do that yet.
Well, you're batting 2-0 against me, man. So you haven't been wrong yet.
I'm a generous God.
I'm wondering what's in the air today that we're both pussies. Neither one of us went for the throat there. We both were very nice to each other.
How all of a sudden, yeah. How did I?
That was weird. That was an odd move. Maybe it is close to Valentine's Day. Maybe we're feeling romantic right now.
I'll see you in the after chat, baby. Give everybody the behind the scenes curtains on why this is a strong podcast.
This is all the filtered stuff. These are the nice things we say.
Honestly, I forgot what the question was. I had an answer at the beginning, but it just kind of melted away, man. I was just lost in your eyes, brother.
I believe it was staying power, wasn't it? Wasn't it the last thing we asked?
Yeah.
Something about the staying power of these institutions, but yeah, I really don't remember what my answer was going to be. It felt like a good one too. There was something I wanted to say, but everyone's just going to have to imagine it because it's melted away.
It's very insightful. It's well thought out. There's definitely like a tagline to a YouTube video in there somewhere.
Absolutely. I probably quoted a book I read recently.
One of your smut novels.
Oh, 100%.
Oh man. Well, I have some things. Okay. I want to talk Super Bowl. I want to talk some football, halftime shows with you guys. Is that off the air stuff?
It's totally fine. If anyone's still listening right now, why not?
Let's go for
You
it.
know, we didn't put a
Keep
gun
it
against their
rolling.
head. They can click close whenever they want
That's
to.
actually very fair. Well, you fell asleep in it. Logan, what were your thoughts?
I went outside and helped grill, and I came inside and the game was about over. It was like,
when did you? What was the score when you came in?
It was a 3-score game by the time I got back inside. I want to say, was it 21-0 at one point in time? I don't remember the exact. But see, I almost missed it myself. Like I came back in to see how close the game was going to be, and it was never close again. Once I started watching, like it was already over.
There was I went to a Super Bowl party with some friends and a bunch of people I didn't know. And it was really funny to see the reactions. The very first pass interference that AJ Brown got, everybody, well, here we go. It's not even the first series, and here come those cheating refs, and then it got out of control. But what was really funny, it was at 34-0. There were still people who were like, well, it's possible. The Chiefs might come back.
Mahomes is not Brady.
And I was one of those people too. When it was like 28 or whatever, it was like 25-0. I'm like, well, I don't know. We've seen crazier comebacks before. Don't count them out. And at a certain point, it's like, all right, well, this is over. But it was the amount of refusal to be stoked about a blowout was really interesting. I thought that was the most fascinating thing about the game is everybody, when they're up 34-0, there's still people like, oh, it's not over yet. Like, don't get too excited, everybody. Like, the Chiefs can come back.
Well, because they knew the script. They knew it was supposed to happen. That's one of my I found it fascinating for a while. And I've come around now to where I'm almost getting annoyed with people who are like everything staged in the NFL. And like specifically, you come down to some games where they're like, they caught Travis Kelce caught a one-handed touchdown pass in a Super Bowl to win the game. And they're like, of course they rigged it for the Chiefs. And you're like, what if he dropped that one-handed pass on 4th down? You know, like was the Mafia comfortable putting the entirety of their scheme of fixing this game on Travis Kelce catching a one-handed pass and dragging his toes in the back of the end zone? I've also watched a couple YouTube breakdowns just to see like, okay, let's see what they're talking about with games are rigged. And the most common thing I've noticed with those types of videos is guys who didn't play football and don't realize there's a safety standing just outside of the camera shot. Where they'll be like, oh, right here. And you're like, this guy was about to get his head taken off. Like, you don't understand what's going on here. But yeah, I found it very fascinating at first, and I've come around to almost feeling woefully upset at people as soon as they start crying about cheating in sports. I'm like, just shut up. I mean, down to the point of like, Patrick Mahomes gets every call. The refs always favor him. And you're like, okay, you know who else that actually happened for in the history of sports is every single player that was the best at his game.
For sure.
To the point of when I go play my old man Thursday night game, the guys who are better than me get more calls than I do. It's just how it goes. Every referee can see what player is more talented and naturally defers to that player. It just fucking happens.
LeBron gets more calls. Jordan got more calls. Tom Brady got more calls. Yeah,
it's the most natural thing in the world is refs bowing to competence. And we all should do it too. We all should do it too.
I was thinking that how funny it would be, like if there is an NFL script, how upset Patrick Mahomes was when they started for the script reading. So they all fly right. So they all fly to New Orleans on like Sunday, right before the Super Bowl. They're all week, and so on Monday, it's like, all right, well, here's the NFL script reading, and it's like, you guys are gonna go down like 25-0, and Patrick Mahomes like, okay, greatest comeback in all time.
Right,
I'm gonna get in,
moment.
right. I'm gonna get in, like I'm gonna outperform Tom Brady's comeback by 1 point. I'm gonna become like in the GOAT conversation instantly. He's like, and you're gonna go down 34-0. It's like, what?
Guys, let's keep it realistic for the comeback, you know?
And it's like, oh, there's no comeback. And it's like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And everybody's so upset. Like Andy
That's
Reid,
another good case.
Travis
Like,
everybody's just throwing things in the meeting. You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Oh,
yeah, that's
absolutely.
another good example. Is like, at what point during the fixing the games argument where they're like, yeah, let's take this product, the biggest game of the year that makes the most money, and let's make it just unwatchable for most of the game. Let's just have it be an absolute blowout, one-sided all the way. Like, yeah, I'm sure that's the way they drew it up to help to manipulate their property into being worth more money. I'm sure they wanted to have a horrible crescendo to the end of the year.
For sure.
Oh, absolutely. And they definitely didn't want the Bills in the Super Bowl either, because Lord knows nobody wants to see that happen. Come on. But you know how
man, that has to be like the Bills have to feel like they could have beat the Eagles. Josh Allen has to be like weighing heavy on his head that his destiny is to lose by 3 points in the AFC Championship game every year to Patrick Mahomes.
Absolutely. I'd be fucking pissed if I was him, man.
That's a big monkey on your back.
The curse.
I think we love conspiracy theories. You know, we like to feel that we're peeking behind the curtain, that there's some magic to this world. Everything is not what it seems. You know, believe that a football game is actually just a football game, it kind of requires you to give up on some of that childlike joy. You know, the same joy that we feel whenever we see Building 7 collapsing. We're like, aha, I knew it. It's the fucking something. And personally, I still have that joy. I haven't let it go yet. But
I've not let Building 7 go.
There's just so many more interesting conspiracies to be into than fixing NFL games, though. Like Bigfoot being an interdimensional shapeshifter, like the interesting things, you know, the ones
that's
that have
why the national park budget is so high. That $450 million for protection. It's not.
You know how hard it is to phase in and out of dimensions
from Bigfoot.
Oh man, I think you're onto something though. There is something that's almost comforting in a weird way about conspiracies, that it's easier. Maybe it's not easier, but I don't know. There's some weird deep level of comfort to know that it's like, well, maybe there are people in charge and they can rig the game, versus it's just chaos. And even the most powerful power brokers in the world are only, it's like they might have a little bit quicker information, but they're not in control. You know what I mean? And it's very unsettling to know that literally nobody is in control. The United States government is in control. Those long noses with the space lasers aren't in control. It's all just random and chaotic, and things can happen. And I think there's something to that, why we lean towards conspiracies, even if we don't like the conspiracies, even if they're horrendous conspiracies. I think somewhere deep in us, it makes us a little, I don't know, it like comforts us that someone's, versus just like, no, it's just chaos. Shit happens.
It makes you feel better. And it's kind of funny too, because like I'd say 90% of conspiracy theories, if you look at them, the actual like real explanation makes just way more sense. Like, for instance, like, would you want to script an entire NFL game when, as an owner, you just make money from concession sales, TV, your deals, and like ticket sales? That's a lot of work. Why not just find the best players and just let them go? You know,
you're also
it'd be easier.
You're also risking the entire television arm of that project, because if it comes out that it's fake, you lose the vast majority of your viewership immediately. It's like you would be jeopardizing the bigger moneymaker in this conspiracy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's far easier just to have a team of scouts just constantly combing through high school and college football games to find the best. And it really is. Like, it's just way easier than like scripting one-handed catches, fingertip catches, and like random refs missing obvious calls. It's impossible.
Right.
It's too much work.
It's easier just to let Howard Roseman be good at his job, you know?
Now,
100%.
to the credit of the conspiracy theorist on this one, we did have an NBA ref that got in trouble for gambling and fixing games in the 80s.
And so did
he
Pete
went
Rose.
to trial, and they did an internal investigation, and after it was all said and done, the NBA determined that there was nobody else that was ever had anything to do with gambling. It was just this one guy, and it's not anything we ever have to worry about again. So
Sure.
that always felt a little suspicious. All right,
Well,
you guys said it's good, and nobody else is involved, just the one guy, huh? All right.
It's like Shohei Ohtani's translator.
Also, despite that one guy ratting out a bunch of people, they just determined that nobody had that he ratted out.
That's all false evidence. He's just lying to save his neck, for sure. Like, do we really believe that Shohei Ohtani's translator was just taking his money and, just like running around doing all of these extravagant bets with illegal bookies without his, like, we're really supposed to believe that this guy is just out here running amok with his funds. Let's give him put him to prison and it's all good. Problem solved. It's not the fact that this like 20-something-year-old has like an exorbitant amount of money and he loves to gamble. That has nothing to do with it. It's definitely the translator running amok.
He's from Asia. Gambling's in their blood.
I have a mixed response to that statement. I don't know how to feel about it, actually.
I remember that story coming out, and I remember being blown away that ESPN was constantly just being like, isn't that crazy that he lets his interpreter have charge of all of his bank accounts and his bookie? Like, yeah, man, that's insane. And I'm like, yeah, it is insane, guys. these are his bets, you fucking idiots. Like, he doesn't want to get kicked out of pro sports, so he made this guy be the fall guy. Like, how are we not putting these dots together? It is illegal for him to bet, and he's sacrificing $90 million a year if he gets caught. Yeah, obviously.
It's such an irresponsible decision.
Right? Like, I can't believe these pro athletes are taken advantage of like this, like they work so hard to make this money and then there are these vultures around them. They're going to just abuse the goodwill that they give. It's like, come on, bro.
And he's only spending it on sports betting. If it were me, I would have bought a car by now.
Right. Yeah, he didn't buy a car. He just put on some bets.
Yeah.
Honestly,
if anything, that's the conspiracy, is that if any tremendous amount of money is changing hands and everybody's banding together to keep something under, it's that Shohei Ohtani was gambling and shouldn't be allowed to play in the MLB, but he's too goddamn popular, so they didn't give a fuck that he was gambling.
Honestly, though, I don't get why athletes aren't allowed to gamble on games they play in. Like, as long as you're not.
What do you mean? You don't get why?
Well, hold on. Like, what's his face?
Yeah, what are you talking about, Terry Rozier?
Calvin Ridley. He got banned for like an entire season from the NFL for betting on the team he plays on to win. It's not like he's out there like dropping balls or anything. He's going out there playing his hardest. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, it's one thing to bet against yourself and then to like tank the game. I understand that. But like any other bet, like it feels completely legal to me.
So is the standard like we should allow professional athletes to bet on themselves, but as soon as they bet against them, that's when it's not okay?
Well, I think incentives should be aligned with fair play. And so long as the bet makes sense from a fair play standard, I don't see anything wrong with it. But like, again, if you're betting on yourself to win, like a whole year banned from the NFL because he put money on himself. Like, I mean, dude, I'd bet on myself all the time if I was in pro sports. I couldn't help it. I would just be like, oh,
I'm the best.
Man, you think those wide receivers are divas right now. Think about them on the sideline when you've run the ball 50 times and they had the over on 7.5 catches. Destroying things on the sideline, losing their mind.
The ball.
$10 million bet they placed yesterday. Please, just a slip screen. I don't care. Just throw me the ball 5 more times.
And then you get petty coaches who know.
Oh, absolutely.
Who know what the bets are, and they just be like, nope, I'm going to cost you $5 million today.
There'd be whole team contracts where you're not allowed to gamble on yourself. I guarantee it. Just like Patrick Mahomes is not allowed to snowboard, they have all sorts of clauses in there, and I'm totally fine with that. But like, if it's not variant contract, it just feels unfair that you can't bet on yourself in Vegas. Did you guys ever see the movie Dodgeball?
Yeah.
The
Yep.
underdog
Oh, yeah.
story. Yeah, you remember how the movie ends? He took
Yeah,
all the
they get-
money and he bet on himself to lose.
I never thought about that. That whole story was bullshit, huh?
Oh, 100% bullshit. There's no way. Here I am, like, actually, Logan, that was fictional story, believe it or not.
based on real life events.
But like, that's a little fucked up that he was allowed to bet on himself to lose. Like, there's no way Vegas is like, so you're in the
Yeah.
finals and you're betting on your team to lose?
No, you're wrong. He bet on himself to win in dodgeball.
Did
He won the standoff
Yeah,
at the end.
no, he bet on himself to win at like really bad odds.
Was that how
Yeah.
that ended?
Yeah, he
Yeah, because he
took-
he blindfolded himself for the sudden death at the end, and
he took the
blasted
money
him in the
that was
face.
offered for the payout and then bet on himself
Put it
on
on
like
himself to
20 to
win.
1 odds to win.
All right, let me see if there's some sort of like summary online.
Fake
I-
news.
I definitely. Oh, okay, that's what it was. So the original ending they lost, but
Oh,
the ending they went with for the theater.
oh really?
Yeah. I had the DVD. I just couldn't remember them losing, but okay, that
Maybe
makes
you
sense.
watched
So
the
yeah,
alternative ending this entire time.
So we're the kids in Africa that got the wrong t-shirts.
100%. Honestly, that's how all of our movies go. Like, did you guys ever see a law-abiding citizen?
I did. Where he gets
Logan?
trapped.
Oh,
I have
Logan,
not.
you gotta watch it. You gotta go watch it.
It's actually not a bad
Put
movie.
it on my list.
I won't spoil it for you, Logan, but the ending that they give us is not the one that they had originally picked. And I'll just say that much.
That makes so much sense now that you say
Yep.
that. When I
Yep.
saw the ending, I was like, a little suspicious. That
Like,
seems
really?
too neatly wrapped up for it's like a classic American cinema. We're gonna resolve this in in favor of the protagonist at the end of this movie.
Adam Sandler
Yeah.
gets the blonde again.
It's one of those weird movies where they like basically paint an entire group as being like awful, they're bad guys, you shouldn't root for them. And then at the end, they're like, yeah, but actually they were the good guys. They won. Everything's
Just
fine.
Like,
Everything's cool. It's fine. It's fine.
Interesting.
But I don't want to
They
stay too much.
softened it up
Don't
for
worry.
theaters, huh?
Oh, 100% softened it up. for
oh,
theaters,
that's
man.
fascinating. I had no idea.
Oh yeah, that movie would have been perfect if not for the ending.
Dude, with a different ending. That's why it's like it's an okay movie because the ending robs you of what you want. Yeah.
100%.
Um,
I
Keep
love that movie just because like the little details. Whoever was writing that movie took a lot of time just to make sure they like slapped you over the head with like everything. Like there's the girl boss in the movie, and like if you pay attention, they keep having her like miss dates and like lose boyfriends because she's just working too hard. And like they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to put any of that in the movie. But they're actually like, yeah, there's a real sacrifice if you want to, have this job. And every single person in there was sacrificing something. And they could have gone without it. Like none of these people were like the stars of the movie. None of them were that important. What's his face kept missing all his daughter's recitals, and like his daughter ended up having to go through that whole like horrible scream fest because he just didn't show up to her like singing. It's like, bro, you don't have to go to work, man. Just go. And it was just great. I really enjoyed the movie from the perspective of the author. Sorry, the writer was just like, everyone's family is a mess because they're so good at their jobs. I'm like, yeah, fucking fire, man. It was just great.
Oh, that's
Well,
what's up.
How did it? I mean, we're all putting it off right now, but the most important part of the Super Bowl, was it as satisfying as you were hoping for, Matthew?
I actually
Did
woke
you get
up
everything
mad.
you wanted? Oh, nice.
Yes. It gave me everything I wanted. And
Gave us the
God,
moment.
dude, I need an hour to nerd out about everything. Dude, I have done nothing but binge on that halftime show. I've rewatched it probably 4 times, only because it is, dude, it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. I hope one day to be in a position to be able to just tell everybody, go fuck yourself. Like, not only, like, don't get me wrong, it's very satisfying to hear a Super Bowl crowd scream Drake called A minor, but also like all of the symbolism, Uncle Sam, the commentary about it, like the way he scripted it, everything about that show, just chef's kiss. Like Kanye says he's a genius.
Outside of audio
Kanye
quality.
is a mouth breather compared to what Kendrick Lamar is. Like Kanye is just a dumb kid that didn't get into art school, and Kendrick is a true savant artist.
I actually heard a perspective that this is actually bad news for Kendrick. That this is exactly where Kanye was as the chosen one at 10-ish years ago, and that we watched him get co-opted by our government, and the CIA eventually drove him insane like they do everybody. And that we're watching. This is the peak of Kendrick, but we're about to watch him become everything cringe and eventually fall down the same path of insanity that Kanye's gone down.
If
There's
If
no
it happens-
Compared to Kendrick, hasn't had a disclosed schizophrenia diagnosis, so that bodes well for Kendrick.
yeah, I mean, if it happens, then I guess it sucks to suck, but that's also part of the. It's also part of the thing that I liked the most about the performances. You have Samuel L. Jackson, right? Uncle Sam, and comment. It's like as he's doing his skit, like it wasn't. Now this is so deep in the weeds, right? Like if this is a Super Bowl show, you would expect him like to put out bangers, like play the hits, play Money Trees, like go through the catalog. This is a big audience. Make it digestible for a bunch of middle-aged white people that have never heard you. Like play the hit. No, he didn't. He went with some very like specific tailored music, and Samuel L. Jackson comments on it where he's like, "You got to play the game." He's like, "Nope, too loud, too ghetto," because he opens up with like a rap song, and then he tailors it. Then he goes to Humble, and then he's like, "Oh, you're getting closer." Then he has SZA come out, and they sing the hit from the Black Panther, and he's like, "Yeah, now we're talking. Don't blow it." And it was, I think the commentary, like it was so fucking smart. Also, I mean, yeah, I'm just nerding out on this. At the very start, when it's like you get the big overview of the field and the PlayStation controller, like Sony, who also owns Drake's, like the record label that Drake works for, is ultimately owned by Sony. But if you watch the flashes of the controller, it is the cheat code to armor and full armor and health in Grand Theft Auto. Like that is the flashing of the controller buttons when it first starts. I just think it was so well done.
All of
so
that
well
went
done.
over my head. The entire thing went over my head.
Yeah, I got as far as recognizing a PlayStation controller. That's about as close as I got to unraveling that mystery myself.
I wasn't awake for that part.
I don't know. It was brilliant. And don't get me wrong, like I think in terms of Super Bowl shows, it's going to go down very poorly for the masses. I can't imagine
grumblings.
I was about to say, I can't imagine being in like a room in Iowa filled with like a bunch of like 40 to 50-year-old white dudes watching the Super Bowl. I can only imagine it was either just silence or this is the worst fucking halftime show ever.
Couple racial epithets thrown in there
For
as well.
sure. Yeah.
I did have an old boomer white guy today I was talking to about it, and he was like, I didn't really get what was going on. Like, I knew he was like mad at Drake, but like, what's the beef? And I kind of like gave him a quick breakdown and was like, it was, I mean, mostly. And he was like, the audio wasn't that great because he didn't lip sync it. And I was like, yeah, that's not really, I mean, the whole point of it was he was calling Drake a pedophile. And this old white guy was like, oh, okay, it was probably a better performance than I thought it was then. That's not bad.
It's like, oh, yeah. Well,
I like that he got on board with it. Like, as soon as I said that, he was like, oh, all right, that's pretty cool.
we're calling Drake a faggot? For sure. I'm in. It was, yeah.
it does
Go ahead.
contextualize rap beefs in general. Because, sometimes it's kind of like, damn, I can't believe they shot Biggie over this. But, like, if Drake wasn't Canadian and he had guns, like, dude, there is no way he wouldn't have at least, like, tried a drive-by on Kendrick by now. Like, how long has this been going on? Like, 7 months, 8 months? Everywhere he goes, this song is playing. Like, it's at clubs. It's at restaurants. It's at
It
the
won
Super
5
Bowl.
Grammys, dude.
They played it at the Grammys. They've literally played it
Which
everywhere.
is odd
And
because it's a very pedophile-friendly crowd out there. So you think they'd be
right.
Also true. Well, if you can deflect, dude, if Drake is, if you can deflect, yeah, for sure. Throw stones.
Well, like, it must be wild. Because, like, sometimes you listen to, like, even, like, contemporary rap beefs, like the whole, like, O-Block thing where, like, a lot of them were getting shot because, like, songs got popular just in Chicago about, like, it's a diss track. And, you got to shoot someone over that. This song is, like, nationwide. You can, like, listen to, like, people who don't even speak English singing along to it. They know the words. Like, it's totally unescapable. There's nowhere Drake can go outside of, like, I don't know, like Marrakesh or, like, Yemen. Maybe they don't know the song in Yemen. Like, I don't know where else he goes. Like, this thing follows him around everywhere.
I think it's time we repatriate Mr. Drake, Mr. Aubrey. Let's send him home. We're done with him. We had our fun. We don't want to play with this anymore.
Dude, Donald Trump had like 2 tweets. I wish that would have been one. After hearing Kendrick's performance, my first order of business tomorrow will be to deport Drake. I wish, dude. That's an alternative history that I wish we lived in that timeline where Donald Trump. But you know what I mean? It's like Donald Trump probably was not very ecstatic about the performance either, where he says the revolution will be televised. You picked the right time, but the wrong guy. It's a very what I mean? And that's the thing I love the most about it. He just said "fuck you" to everybody, and it was such a meta commentary on. Like,
why is Mace Windu down there? Isn't he a Jedi? I don't understand this show.
Yeah. I have more I want to say, but I think it's probably served at this point on the podcast. We'll talk off air. That's actually a really good point to end on. Why is Mace Windu down there?
He didn't even bring out the lightsaber. I don't understand. It's kind of a big event.
Oh man. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for listening to Against the Mob podcast. We are a very serious podcast that talks about very serious stuff, as you can tell. Only the highest brow comedy, highest brow topics, only the biggest brained stuff you could ever imagine. That's all we talk about. Yep, that's us. That's us. A big brain, no brain crossing shoulder on this podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you. With all that being said, we fight against the mob with people over politics. See you next week.